Chapter 2587. Do you really think I am that weak? Di Fui was reluctant to wait for a response from Yun Yanli, and went straight to business. Streaks of 7-colored rays were cast, filling the square with enchanting lights. Soon, many pieces were gathered from all over the place and put together by the light. Soon 2 faint silhouettes could be seen floating in the air, swaying in a secured bubble of 7-colored rays. Their features were slowly emerging as more and more pieces came together. Breathlessly, Yun Yanli watched as the pieces came together, forming into 2 faces that he could immediately recognize. There were a man and a woman, the former emperor and empress immortals. After years of suffering, it was only natural that their faces looked weak and haggard. However, they looked undeniably better than 2 mummified corpses from before. Yun Yanli rushed forward and called out loud, "Father! Mother!" The emperor and empress immortals stared at him blankly. It seemed that they had no recollection of him. But shortly after, they seemed to have recalled their past, and looked at Yun Yanli with glowing eyes. "Yanli. Lier. Lier, I am glad to be finally free," the emperor immortal sighed after speaking. "Do not feel sad for us. You should live a meaningful life. Yanli, I am happy that you have made the right decision." The empress immortal reached out her hand, attempting to caress her son. However, her hand swept across his head from one side to another. She could not touch him, due to the manner in which they had been tortured. Their souls were fragile and could not stay intact for long. After the brief exchange with their son, they were at risk of being torn apart again. Yun Yanli was reluctant to be apart from his parents, but he also knew that their souls no longer belonged in his world. He looked at Di Fui with a heavy heart and suddenly kneeled. "My Emperor Lord, I beg you to expiate my parents' sins," he asked earnestly. He knew how to expiate the sins of the dead, but could only perform the spell on souls that were in one piece. His parents' souls were obviously incomplete, so a normal act of expiation would only cause their souls to fall apart and become scattered again. Di Fui did not make things any harder for him. He raised his hand and held their souls in 2 separate halos of 7-colored light. "Forget that you were once an immortal. Forget that you were once a spirit. What happens in this life stays and ends in this life. Now go." Swiftly, he sent the light bubbles away and watched as they disappeared at the edge of the sky. Yun Yanli closed his eyes as he fell to the ground, and bowed a few times as a sign of gratitude. Quietly he then got to his feet, and was ready to leave. Feng Ruhua was not pleased with the way he showed his gratitude. Our master has done a great deal for him, and yet he only bowed for a few times in return? Kun Shui disagreed. "Little lunatic, you know nothing about men." Feng Ruhua was irritated. "How many times do I have to tell you? Do not call me a lunatic." Kun Shui was not in the mood to argue with her, so he turned around and left swiftly. "I am going to have a look at the star formation. The resentful spirits must not be freed. Otherwise they will taunt the people even more." With a leap, he disappeared from the place. Gu Shijio then asked Di Fui, "Shall we go and have a look at the star formations as well? That place is full of trouble, so we should quickly destroy them. By the way, how are you feeling? Do you need to rest?" Di Fui had just been through a major catastrophe, and was forced to deal with so many things at once. He must be drained by all that had happened. Gu Shijio recalled how weak she was right after a catastrophe. Therefore, she felt that he must be feeling quite weak right now, although he did not show it. Di Fui caressed her face affectionately and said, "Darling, do you really think I am that weak?" He reached out for her, and carried her in his arms right away. "Let's go and check out the damn star formation in this city. Hey, put me down. I can walk." Chapter 2588. She is the true savior of us all. Although Gu Shijio longed for his care, she was too shy to show her affection for him so publicly. "I only want to carry you in my arms. If you don't allow me to carry you, I will check on the star formation." Di Fui pressed his finger against her lips to stop her from making any objections. The people around them had clearly heard everything they shared, so they chimed in. "Miss Gu, let Emperor Lord carry you. Miss Gu, you should stay in his arms. That is right. You are pregnant, so you must not do any strenuous activities. It will be better for Emperor Lord to carry you around." The wave of persuasions continued. Gu Shijio did not know how to argue with them. In fact, she was quite delighted by their response. Furthermore, she was beyond grateful to be in his arms again. Obediently, she reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. "All right, secure me in your arms and never leave me again," she said while leaning her head against his chest. However, she still felt the need to correct the public after some thoughtful considerations. "His surname is D, but you should all address him as Lord. It is how his people used to address him." "Yes, my lord. My lord, you will definitely save us all from the miseries of the Shura world. My lord, heaven must have sent you here for our salvation. My lord." People rushed in to express how grateful and hopeful they were for having him. Nevertheless, Di Fui was not too bothered by all this talk. He was used to being the center of attention for his entire life. "I am alive because of her. I would have been burned alive if it were not for her valiant efforts. She is also the one who discovered the star formations. You should be grateful to her," he emphasized. He gave the woman in his arms a squeeze. "She is the true savior of us all." Without a doubt, the people started thanking Gu Shijio profusely with words of appreciation. Gu Shijio tightened her arms around his neck and sighed. "You are here to build my reputation again. Are you planning to leave me here, to become their lord? Baby, you are overthinking. If you leave me alone again, I promise to never speak to you again, and to marry someone else instead." Gu Shijio had to threaten him to make herself feel better. "Don't worry. I will be here for you for all eternity. You have me." She had been waiting for the promise for too long. Finally, she heard him promise her. In the past, he would always talk about something else whenever she spoke about their future. She had always thought that there was something that he could not share with her, only to finally realize that he refused to promise her an eternity, because he knew very well that there was no future for them. Finally, he made the promise to seal their love forever. He was back for real this time, and would never leave her again. She looked to the sky and saw the dark clouds that were still blocking the sun. However, the dark skies did not bother her at all, as her heart was already blooming with joy like a beautiful spring day. All of a sudden, she thought of Zhu Duqing again, and started wondering what his real name could be. Troubled, she asked Di Fui, "Do you think that he somewhat resembles Long Fan?" "Not quite alike, I reckon. Their temperament and kung fu are not exactly the same." Long Fan clearly did not share the same personality as Zhu Duqing. Furthermore, their kung fu was different. Nonetheless, they could not be sure as Zhu Duqing had rarely shown anyone his kung fu, so no one knew exactly how powerful he was. Moreover, the man who appeared in Yin Yanli's dreams that helped him shape the half-orcs reminded Di Fui very much of Long Fan. He somehow felt that this must be connected to the man. Chapter 2589. How is he not the same? Could they somehow be sharing a unique connection? Although this was uncertain, Di Fui was sure of one thing. He is coming for me. It does not sound right. When you were stranded in the Devil Kingdom, your kung fu was not as powerful. It would have been easy for him to finish you off back then. Why would he make such an elaborate plan just to defeat you? Di Fui looked troubled after listening to Gu Zijia's comment. He too could not figure out why. Nevertheless, the star formation was his first priority, so he needed to solve it first. With his kung fu, it would not be difficult for him to eradicate the array. As for the general public, they finally had the chance to witness how a star formation actually looked like, and was shocked by the howling spirits that were struggling in agony. Fortunately, the purification of resentful spirits was nothing difficult for Di Fui. After a series of expiations, all of the angry spirits were finally freed from their deeply rooted grudge, and disappeared from the mortal world. The star formation had lost its wickedness and returned to its basic form. As soon as the star formation recalibrated, the dark clouds faded, giving way to warm sunshine. The cheering crowd shouted for joy as if it were a grand celebration. Everything that happened in Luohua City spread across the Shura world like wildfire, giving the people in every other city a new sense of hope. They rushed to their own administrative centers respectively, and demanded the exposure of the star formations. As soon as the governor surrendered, they waited patiently for Di Fui's arrival to release the spirits. Is this the same Devil King? Wan Hongxiu was quite troubled. How is he not the same? Little Hong, what do you mean? Feng Ruhua was not pleased by the question. I can see that the Devil King's kung fu has greatly improved. He seems a little different as well. More importantly, he is helping the mortals rebuild their cities and has become their savior. They are even addressing him as their lord. It seems like a strange way to address him since he is not trying to be their ruler, and is not one of them. So what if he wants to rule the place? In fact, the Devil Clan is quite similar to them. We are only different in the ways we practice. There is no need to fight endlessly with them. A long, long time ago, the Devil Clan and the cultivators used to live together peacefully. It was only when the man in black showed up and drove a wedge between us that things started to change. He was the one who initiated the disaster, but blamed it on the Devil Clan. That sparked the feud between us. The second guardian, Shui Junzhou, shared his knowledge with them. He was the oldest among them, and also the most knowledgeable. It is true. The Devil Clan and the mortals are not very different from one another. I used to walk the land with Mimi, freely and casually. The dazzling human world used to be filled with a myriad of temptations and beautiful landscapes, unlike now, where everything is barren and unruly. Tian Xiuxiu added and sighed. I like how the mortal world used to be. Tian Mimi agreed with the statement. Perhaps the Devil King is trying to return everything to its original state. After all, the human world is part of the Shura world. We should keep our prejudices behind and work together with our Devil King. Feng Ruhua seemed very motivated. Definitely. We all have to work together with the Devil King. All right, we should stop the discussion now. Wan Xiuhong, the Devil King has instructed us to search for the Black Bamboo Man. But he clearly is hiding from us. We have not found a single bamboo leaf all day long. Where is he? Tian Xiuxiu frowned. Find him. Shui Junzhou ordered in a straightforward manner. Tell every spy in the Devil Kingdom to find him. Actually, I am more concerned about the Devil King. All of the guardians are not with him. Even Leader Kuan has been sent away for a mission. What if the Black Bamboo Man ambushes him? Do you think that the Great Devil King should be worried about an ambush? Even if we were around when the Bamboo Man showed up, do you really think that we could stop him? Chapter 2590. Everything felt so surreal. Even if we could not stop him, at least we could be around to help him take down the man in black. It is unnecessary. The Devil King and Miss Gu are inseparable now. We should give them some privacy. Your presence will not be appreciated if you insist on hanging around them. All right, we shall go now. We have better things to do. Feng Ruhua and the rest of her friends were having a little discussion on one of the hills. Soon, they ended the meeting and went straight to work. In an inn of Luohua City, Gu Shijiu was enjoying a glass of honey. The inn was actually a place she knew. It was the place where she stayed with Shen Yanma when they first arrived in the city. She chose to stay in the exact same room as before. She recalled the moment when they first arrived here. He wanted to share a room with her but was rejected, so he moved to another room and disappeared the next day. Many things had happened during the time they were apart. She had been keeping everything in the room in the same condition, and would often visit the place from time to time to look for him. Nonetheless, she was always left disappointed. Di Fui's disappearance had thrown a gloom over the place. Coming back here again gave her an overwhelming rush of emotions as she recalled everything that had happened. Fortunately, things were not the same as they were before. This time, she was reunited with Di Fui. They intended to stay in the inn for only a short while, but he insisted on transforming the place to look like his second home. Having gotten rid of the star formation, he immediately leaned his head on her shoulder and said that he needed a place to rest. Gu Shijiu knew how exhausted he must be after a long, tiring day. She wanted to find a better place for him to stay, but he wanted a place that he was more familiar with, so they returned to the inn. He was her first and utmost priority, for she had waited too long for his return. Lovingly, she chose to put his requests on top of everything else. Although she did not feel all good about the inn, she chose to stay there with him. Upon returning, Di Fui had assigned everyone with a different mission and hustled them off. As for the people who they met along the way, Di Fui also managed to keep them away from disturbing him with a few polite words. The people had even cleared out the place and made sure that Di Fui would not be disturbed by anyone within 100-meter range. He told them that he liked the place to be quiet. Any noise, even a falling needle within 100 meters, would disrupt his sleep. Gu Shizhou could tell that his finicky patterns had also returned, along with his kung fu and his memory. At this very moment, Di Fui was having a bath in the bathroom next to her. Cleaning his body only required him to cast a simple spell, but he insisted on having a bath. Gu Shizhou could not understand what he was really thinking, but she decided not to argue with him, as he was already tired enough. She looked around the place while waiting. Everything felt so surreal. There was a brand new cover, embroidered with a pair of floating mandarin ducks. The room was also separated by a 6-sided folding screen, an antique shelf, and a small wooden table in the middle. The decorations and furniture were so much like their home in the lower bound. Everything in the room reminded her of home, thus provoking a moment of nostalgia. Thinking about home, she could not help but wonder how Mu Feng and Mu Yin were doing at the moment. As a lord, she was not supposed to leave the lower bound for more than 6 months, but it had been more than a year since she had returned. The lower bound must have changed during her absence. "Baby, what are you thinking about?" Someone approached and hugged her from behind. She was immediately overwhelmed by a refreshing scent, which she immediately recognized. Chapter 2591. A comfortable night-long chat. She turned around to look at him, and was slightly stunned. He looked so different from his normal self. His long hair was still dripping wet, and he was covered only in a loose layer of white pajamas, revealing his toned and muscular upper chest. He looked unusually attractive, especially when the water dripped from his hair onto his bare chest. It was a highly evocative sight. Di Fui had always been a very neat person, which was a very apparent trait that could be recognized from the way he dressed. Sometimes he would purposely asymmetrically style his clothes, but never as casual as how he looked now. Gu Shizhou could not get her eyes off from his body. He was indeed a very handsome man. Gu Shizhou buried her head on his chest and softly said, "I was thinking about the lower bound." Di Fui did not answer her immediately. Instead, he gently pushed her back a little so that he could look into her eyes. "Shouldn't you be thinking of me?" Although he had recalled his memories from the past, he still retained his identity as Shen Nianma over here. When he was younger, his mother once said that she especially liked it when Shen Juli just came out of the bath. She loved it because it was the time when Shen Juli looked the best with his manly figure and irresistible charm. Certainly, the conversation between his parents after his dad's shower remained a private affair. He tried to eavesdrop on their conversation before, but nothing made sense to him back then. Nonetheless, he still remembered every piece of information very well. Therefore, he wanted to do the same with Gu Shizhou and took a bath. He thought that she would be stunned by his beauty and possibly even blush. To his dismay, her reaction was the complete opposite. Being slightly disappointed, Di Fui wondered if he was not charming enough to excite her anymore. "You are right here, so I do not have to keep thinking about you." Gu Shizhou happily tightened her arms around his waist, and was completely lost in the moment. It was good to have him back in her arms. She could finally feel his warmth, and he was no longer just a shadow in the dark. "Baby, do you think I look any different tonight?" Di Fui refused to give up. Yes." Gu Shizhou finally looked at him properly. Then she stood and held his hand. "You must be tired, right? You did not even want to use the cleaning spell just now. Let's go. Now that you are done with your bath, we should rest." Di Fui was speechless. Things did not seem to unfold the way he wanted. He let her guide him all the way to the bed until she then sat him down and took off his shoes. "All right, now get some rest." Her obedience had come as a surprise to him, as he was clearly waiting for something else. "Shall we sleep on the same bed?" After contemplating for a moment, Gu Shizhou agreed. She used the cleaning spell on herself before climbing up to the bed. Then, she picked a spot and climbed into one of the covers. "All right, let's rest." Di Fui was speechless. They had not met for so long, and all she wanted was to get comfortable for a night-long chat. Did she know how much he actually longed for her the moment he remembered everything about their past? He only wanted to hug her so tightly in his arms and shower her with all the love he had. However, there were things that he needed to attend to, so he had to put his longing aside temporarily. After going through so many heartbreaking moments of separation, making love was the only way he could truly be in the moment and feel her presence. He looked at her for a moment and decided to pull away her covers. Forcibly, he squeezed himself next to her so that he could hug her. "Baby, don't you want me anymore?" His hands then traveled gently across her body. Gu Shijie was lying on his burning hot skin and could feel his body's immediate reaction. She knew what he wanted now. Nonetheless, she decided that it was not the time. "Let's not go there tonight," she said while holding his naughty hand. Chapter 2592. Not the right time for a baby, Difui did not get it. Gu Shijie was surprised by his lack of understanding despite his profound knowledge in medicine. "We shall not do anything in the first 3 months of pregnancy. Otherwise, the baby is going to get hurt." Gu Shijie had to tell him more about the precautions. Difui did not know anything about it. It was utterly new to him. "I will be careful," Difui reassured. He did not want the night to end so early. "No means no," Gu Shijie insisted, while holding his hand. "This is one of the basic things that we need to follow during the pregnancy period. I am sure that our child is different. She will not be as fragile as a normal child. It is better for us to be careful now than to regret later. It is not easy for us to have a child, so I want to make sure nothing happens to her." Gu Shijie fixed her intense gaze on him, while conveying her heartfelt appeal. Intuitively, she put her hand on her belly as if caressing the baby. No one knew how much she wanted a child of her own, but Difui was starting to have an idea. With a sigh, he realized that it was truly not the right time. "All right. I will do as you say." Although he felt an intense longing for her, he decided not to do anything against her will. Moreover, they were doing this for the baby, so he had to be more understanding. For a brief moment, he felt that it was not the right time for them to have a baby. Luckily, the baby was not Di Hao. Otherwise, he would definitely give Di Hao a whip for showing up at the wrong time. So, the two of them remained on the bed together. Difui had been waiting so long for this night, only to be disappointed. He knew that they were not going to do anything, but he could not control the desire that was burning within his body. He tried to regulate his breathing and calm himself down. It was obvious to the person next to him that he had to work very hard to suppress his desires. Gu Shijie felt bad for him. After what they had been through, they still could not truly enjoy their time together. She knew that men would have a strong urge for sex, so she understood how bad he must be feeling right now. She thought about it for a moment and decided to offer him a solution. "Are you feeling very miserable? Should I use my hand?" Difui was surprised by her offer. Then he started laughing out loud. "Silly girl, I am not like any other man. I am not looking for an alternative to temporarily satisfy me." His body did not naturally respond to lust. She was the only one who made him feel that way. If she could not quench his aching need, there was no other physical way to fulfill him. He recited a spell to quench the burning desire, and soon it worked. Observing all this unfold, Gu Shijie realized that there were still some things that she did not quite know about him, even though they had been married for 8 years in their past life. After a while, she could already tell that his body temperature was slowly returning to normal. Obviously, his desire had been extinguished. That was quick. Celestial Master's self-control was indeed impressive, and Gu Shijie was relieved. Although they were not allowed to have any intimate physical contact, she still wanted to cuddle with him. Initially, she did not dare to do so for fear that she might trigger him even further. Perhaps now she could. Gu Shijie had wanted to be close to him ever since she witnessed his timely return. Naturally, she pulled his arm over her and put her head down on his shoulder. "Let us talk," she whispered in his ear. Her action triggered Difui. She was leaning against him so closely and even whispered in her ear. She was the only woman that he had ever wanted, so the contact between their skin posed a great challenge for him to stay controlled. But how could he push her away when she was clearly eager to be in his arms? Therefore, all he could do was to calm his mind and stay focused. What should we talk about? Let's say, there were so many things that Gu Shijie wanted to talk about. For example, She wanted to know how he achieved the advancement of his spiritual power in such a short time. And why did their memories come back to them at the same time? Next, she wanted to find out how much he remembered about his identity as Shen Nianma, now that his past memory as Di Fui had returned to him. Chapter 2593. You have been jealous of yourself. Most importantly, they had not named their baby. That was surely one of the topics that Di Fui wanted to discuss with him. Since they had time on their hands now, it was best if they could decide on the name. Hence, she bombarded him with a series of questions at once. With a sigh, Di Fui answered patiently. All the purple cloud mushrooms were initially formed by my spiritual power, which was then turned into the pills. I absorbed them all, thus recovering my power and my memory as celestial masters wa. I was supposed to die a nameless death as a punishment for sins I committed in my past life. Everything about me should have been wiped away by the heavenly order. However, since we can recall the past now, I believe we have survived the challenge put on us from the heavenly order, so everything about my past will be restored. As for Shen Nianma, it is my current identity, so I definitely remember everything. At least, I no longer have to compete against my old self. Gu Shijie was delighted. Yes, you have always been jealous of yourself. That sounds like me. Di Fui was delighted by her smile. You can only be mine and mine alone. No one can take you away from me. Not even a man from your past. Gu Shijie decided to turn around and lie flat on his body. Are you still going to compete against yourself? She asked while holding her cheeks. Of course not, he swiftly replied. Gu Shijie then changed her position so that they were now facing one another. She placed her hand on his chest while they talked and looked into his eyes. In the dark, her eyes still shone like the brightest stars in the sky. Helplessly, Di Fui could tell that his desire was fiercely building up again. Therefore, he turned and put her down on the bed by his side. Stay here. Lying on your chest is not good for the baby. Her space for development will be limited. What if she cannot grow well? Gu Shijie was speechless. The baby was only a fetus, which was as small as a bean. There was enough space for the baby to move, or even swim around in her womb. Nonetheless, she was happy that he finally showed some serious care for the baby. Obediently, she did as told and lay on her back instead. Do you think Mu Feng and the rest of your people in the lower bound remember you now? Theoretically, yes. When they remember everything, they will surely remember the moment when you were immortalized. It must have been a heartbreaking moment for them. I hope we can return to the lower bound as soon as possible. I cannot wait to see their excitement when they finally meet you. Smilingly, Di Fui agreed. He, too, was eager to be back in the lower bound. He had been a guardian there for at least 10,000 years. It was a place he would call home, so he remained nostalgic about the good old days. When everything here is done, take me to the lower bound. Di Fui then kissed her on the cheek. Sure. Hey, why shouldn't you be taking me instead? Because you are the Lord. It is your territory. No, you have always been the Lord over there. Yes, but it was all in the past. So, are you going to the lower bound as a former Lord? No, I am going there as the Lord's husband. That makes me look cool. Gu Shijie was speechless. No matter which identity he chose to keep, she would be happy as long as she had him by her side. Also, she had decided to let him take over everything when they were back in the lower bound. All she ever wanted was to stay away from all the hassle and enjoy her life. In fact, she was a very carefree woman who was not interested in any sort of power or authority. Freedom in life was what she sought. Being a lord was not what she really wanted. She had only agreed to be the lord because of him. By the way, we have not named our baby. Do you want to give her a name? Gu Shijie was excited. Di Fui gently tapped the tip of her nose and reminded her. The baby is a girl, so her mother should be the one who names her. Chapter 2594. A family of 3. I am bad at picking the name. Gu Shijie was not very sentimental to begin with, and was especially bad at giving names to people or pets. For example, all of the names given to her majestic beings were basic and literal, like the muscle and Lu Wu. Try to think harder. You can do this. Are you too lazy to contribute to the discussion? Or do you care less about her because the baby is a girl and not a boy? You do not even seem to want to name our daughter. Perhaps Gushijo had gone too far. It was not true, and she knew it. He wanted to have a daughter more than a son. He would certainly be happy if their daughter inherited her looks, in which case he would shower them both with an equal amount of love. Nonetheless, since Gushijo pestered him, he began to think of a name. He offered a few suggestions, but they were all rejected by Gushijo for all kinds of reasons. Finally, Difui had one of his flashes of inspiration. Actually, we already have one. What about Dishuyue? You have used the name before, only with a different surname. Slowly but surely, their bedtime conversation ended up lasting the entire night. The discussion was fruitful as they least decided on the name of their daughter, Dishuyue. The next day, they did not head to another city to reconfigure another star formation. Instead, they chose to travel far into the Devil Kingdom to pick up Di Hao. The little boy had been alone in the Devil Kingdom for quite some time now, so they could not help but wonder how he was doing. Had he grown thinner? Had he been a crybaby? Gushijo was the only one who was concerned about his well-being. Difui was never worried, as he knew that the little boy must have been having a good time in the Devil Kingdom on his own. In the end, the truth turned out to be the opposite of Difui's expectations. Gushijo was right. Little Di Hao was sick and looked significantly thinner. The only positive thing about him was that he had grown taller. He looked about a few months old when she last saw him, and now he looked like a 1-year-old. When they found him, he was sitting with his legs crossed on the bed that was only reserved for the Devil King. His complexion was rather pale. A total of 8 servants were responsible for taking care of him. Some were cooling him down with fans. Some were making him tea. Others were giving him a massage. He looked comfortable even though he was ill. Before Difui left the kingdom, he had told the servants to take care of little Di Hao very carefully. However, as days went by, they had grown to be quite sluggish. Typically arrogant, all these servants were only used to obeying the Devil King. If the child had been any less authoritative, these people would not have followed his instructions so attentively. It was safe to assume that the child had given all of them a hard time. Gushijo and Difui went into the room quietly via teleportation, but still managed to alarm them. Who is that? It's the Devil King. My Devil King, you are finally back. It is nice to see you here, my king. All 8 of them eagerly bowed before him. It felt like a bittersweet reunion after a long time of being apart from their precious leader. Di Hao looked up and saw them. With a quick leap, he jumped off the bed and ran towards them with his short, chubby legs. Mother! Father! He was running towards Gushijo with his arms wide open, obviously looking for a hug. However, he was stopped before he could even reach Gushijo. Difui reached out to the child first and put the boy in his arms straight away. Di Hao, you have grown so much. Gushijo resonated with him. Yes, the last time I saw you, you were still a baby who needed to be carried around. Look at you now. You can even run so steadily. Chapter 2595. A family of 3 too. Although Di Hao looked a little thinner than before, his chubby appearance was not any less appealing. His adorable eyes were just too cute to resist. Gushijo could not help it. Come, let me carry the boy. She wanted to take the child from Difui, but he refused. You are pregnant, so you should not be lifting anything heavy. Let me carry him. Gushijo was speechless, and so was Di Hao. He was not heavy to begin with. At most, he was only a few kilograms. Nonetheless, the family of 3 was finally able to come together again. Di Hao was awfully delighted. Prepare the food now. Today's dishes can be a little more special. I want 4 sweet ones, 4 salty ones, 3 spicy ones, and lastly 3 sour ones. He began to make his orders. Quickly, he bombarded the servants with a series of dishes before ordering them away. With a smile, Difui was rather impressed by Di Hao. All of his servants had been trained to be so submissive to his authority, even though he was only a boy. Most importantly, all the dishes that he asked for were Gushijo's favorites. The boy knew exactly what his mother liked to eat. Gushijo still thought that Di Hao's complexion was paler than usual, so she decided to examine his pulse. He seemed to have been involved in a fight, as the signs clearly showed that he was exhausted. Have you been in a fight recently? How did you exhaust so much of your spiritual power? Dihao hesitated. Yes. I was unfortunately trapped in a dream a few nights ago, so I must have used up some of my spiritual power at the time. Gu Shizhou quickly added. Speaking of which, I had a dream about you a few nights ago. Dihao looked at her with his bright eyes. Really? What did you dream about me? Troubled, Gu Shizhou honestly could not recall. I have forgotten it all. Meeting you was the only part that I remember. I cannot remember what the rest of the dream was about. Smilingly, Dihao casually reminded her. Were we watching a show together? Gu Shizhou could somewhat recall that there was indeed a show. However, she could not remember what it was about. However, were you in the same dream with me? What kind of show was it? Gu Shizhou needed to know more. Dihao nonchalantly said. I do not quite remember. A man was playing a game of chess against someone else on a canoe. Some fragmented images flashed by in her mind. She roughly remembered there was something in purple and black. Abruptly, she recalled a man in black. She tried hard to remember, but the images seemed to have been forcibly removed from her head. Just when she tried to recall more, the clue came to a dead end. In a daze, she remembered that she saw two men playing chess, one in purple robes and another in black. The way they played the game of chess was nothing like she had ever seen, as the strategy was completely different. She remembered that she had learned some of the moves as well. However, she could barely remember their appearances. All of a sudden, she managed to link the strategy of the game to Di Fui's unique way of crafting the star formation. Fui, where did you learn about the star formations? Gu Shizhou asked bluntly. As far as she was concerned, most of the former lords from the earth were uninformed about the detailed placement of a star formation. All they knew was to observe the relative movements of the celestial bodies, and could only affect the position of one or two stars at most. On the other hand, Di Fui could alter the positions of most of the stars and change the whole view in general. I learned it myself, Di Fui answered frankly. Do you remember anything before you went to Earth? Nothing, he reassured. She managed to spark some questions for Di Fui. It seemed that he did not have any childhood on Earth. All he remembered was his adolescence as soon as he came into existence. Could there be any other identities that he possessed? Shizhou, has my identity got anything to do with your dream? Did you see me there? Di Fui asked the most important question of all. Chapter 2596. A fight between father and son. Gu Shizhou finally pieced everything together and learned his ultimate identity. He was the master of the heavenly law. Her last mission was to find the reincarnation of the master of heavenly law and give the bracelet to him. The truth was, Shen Nianma was the reincarnation of the master of heavenly law. In other words, Di Fui was the same person. In her dream, she was sure that one of the two men playing the game must be Di Fui, but she had no idea about the other one. The dream was all but a blur to her. She could hardly remember any of it, not even the face of the man in black. She could not help but wonder if the man was Zhu Duqing. She took another look at Di Fui and was amazed that the man before him was the most powerful man of the universe. The man who guarded the heavenly law and the laws of the universe. Apparently, he knew nothing about his powerful background. It was a miracle to be so madly and irrevocably in love with the master of the heavenly law. She wanted to say something but was immediately stopped by the firmament stone. Master, say no more. Trusting the firmament stone, she decided to keep quiet. She knew exactly what the warning was about. She and Di Fui were finally together again after going through so many obstacles. If she went against the heavenly law and spilled the secret, she could be doomed to another endless cycle of painful punishments. Di Fui was smart enough to figure out her concern just by taking one look at her expression. He knew that there was something that she could not share. Moreover, he could read the firmament stone's messages in her head. He was curious but asked nothing more. He was once a lord, so he knew the consequences of going against the heavenly law. He did not care before because he was not concerned about anything. Things were different now that he had found someone that he truly cared about. The woman next to her was one that he could not risk losing. He could not risk jeopardizing their future just to satisfy a moment of curiosity. He had a lot of time to find out more about it, anyway. As long as they were together, there was nothing he could not solve. Shijio, don't say it if you don't feel comfortable. Di Fui then put a piece of meat on her plate and continued. Here, have some fish. It has the nutrients you need to help the baby grow better. Every bone had been carefully removed from the fish, so it looked thoroughly appetizing. Di Hao was innocently looking at Di Fui from the side. Father, I want some fish too. Di Fui did not even look at him. Instead, he moved the plate of fish and placed it right in front of the boy. Have some. Di Hao was speechless. I am afraid of getting choked by the bones. Di Hao sounded naive and guileless. Remove the bones then. Stupid. Do you need me to tell you how to do it? Astonished, Di Hao did not know what to say. Di Fui promised to love him as his own child and treat him very kindly and lovingly. Why would a father refuse to remove the bones for his little child? Di Hao now realized that Gu Shijio was the most important person to Di Fui. Saddened, he was only a boy that was very much neglected. He turned away and looked at Gu Shijio with the same innocent face. Mother. Before Gu Shijio said anything, Di Fui was already interrupting him. Don't try to play innocent. It is the worst form of appeal. As a boy, you should be independent and be responsible for your own needs. You should take care of yourself. Di Fui then shared how Shenjiuli used to teach him. He was happy to use the lesson against the child this time. Di Hao was clearly disappointed. He was miraculously a boy again, and yet he was not allowed to act cute. He thought of Di Fui as an unfriendly father and disliked his sternness. Nevertheless, Di Hao started to sort out the fish himself. Carelessly, he accidentally cut himself with the fish bones, and the tip of his finger started bleeding. Chapter 2597. A fight between father and son. Too tearfully, he looked at Gu Shijio with his big, watery eyes and showed his bleeding finger to her in a somewhat victorious manner. Mother. It hurts. Gu Shijio could immediately tell that something was not quite right between this father and son. She also knew that the boy was too smart for his age. However, he was still physically a child. It was still inappropriate to ask a boy to remove the fish bones all by himself. She threw Di Fui a quick look that reminded him of his promise. A few days ago, he said that he would treat Di Hao like his own son, and today he was already mistreating the boy. Di Hao's innocent look was indeed adorable. She gently held his finger up and started treating the wound. Gu Zijia's soft, warm hands made Di Hao feel very good. It was great to be showered by a mother's love. Therefore, he started using his spiritual power to make the drop of blood on his fingertip look more apparent in order to share a few more moments with his mother. Satisfied, he could not help but look at his father, as if having won a victory. Without saying anything, Di Fui gave him a rather loving look. Di Hao trembled a little and realized immediately that he should not cross any more lines. Thus, he pulled back his hand right after Gu Shijio had applied some medicine on his wound. It is all right. The wound is nothing. I do not mind it at all, he firmly said. A moment later, he then placed a plate of shark's fin and pepper sauce in front of Di Fui. Father, try this. This is your favorite dish. Di Fui studied the plate of shark's fin for a while, and was sure that he had never eaten such a dish before. It could be his favorite food in the future, perhaps. Was the boy trying to please him to avoid getting any retaliation? Di Fui decided not to lower himself to the likes of the boy. The boy must have thought of his character as very narrow-minded and petty, which was not how he was. In the future, Di Fui felt the need to challenge the boy more on his kung fu and spiritual power, so the boy would learn that there was always someone better and stronger than him. Nevertheless, he decided to keep the challenge for later. He took a bite and was immediately hooked. Di Hao then picked up the jug on the table and tried to pour him a glass of wine. Father, try this. The wine tastes heavenly. I am pretty sure you will like it. The boy was too short, so he had to stand on the chair to reach the jug. It was a struggle for him, obviously. Gu Shijio gave the boy a pitiful look. Judging from what he had done for Di Fui, he was a child of sufficient intelligence and understanding. On the other hand, Di Fui seemed like a bad father for the way he treated him. Hence, she decided to take things into her own hands. How, heir, you are still too young to be preparing the dishes for us. Come, Tell mother what you like to eat." His eyes sparkled with joy as soon as he heard Gu Zijia's offer. "Mother, I like to eat crabs and sautéed shellfish." He continued to name a few of his favorites. Gu Shijio noticed that he liked to eat seafood with shells. Also, these dishes happened to be placed right next to Di Fui, which was far from Di Hao's reach. Most importantly, these shells were too hard for Di Hao's soft little fingers. He could not possibly remove the shells by himself with his injured hands. Therefore, Gu Shijio looked at Di Fui and gave him a hint. Di Fui smiled as he knew that he had fallen into his son's trap. Their way of teasing one another was truly like father and son. Di Fui then signaled Di Hao to sit down. "However, I know you like the dishes, so I will definitely satisfy your cravings. I will remove the shells for you," Di Fui said with a soft voice that sounded just like how a loving father would sound. Chapter 2598. A Fight Between Father and Son 3. While Di Fui was talking, he had flicked his fingers several times. The crabs, clams, prawn, along with all the other dishes that Di Hao had requested for were ready to be eaten. All the shelled dishes, the crab meat, shrimp, clam meat, and more, had rushed out from their shells and placed themselves directly on the Di Hao's plate until it was full to the brim. Di Hao was speechless. He did like to eat meat that was mixed together. At the same time, Di Fui had lovingly patted his head. "Eat slowly. If you think it is not enough, I will ask people to cook and peel more for seafood for you. Don't waste my love for you." Di Hao was speechless again. His father was surely behaving in a strange manner that he had not expected. But why? Even though he was wondering if Di Fui was genuine, Di Hao could not refuse the delectable dishes in front of him, so he ate to the point where he could no longer carry his stomach. It seems he was satisfied. Gu Shijio thought of something then and there and asked casually, "Have you ever had a friend or enemy who likes to dress in black?" Di Fui thought about the question for a moment. He scanned through the people he had known throughout the years in his mind, and then shook his head. "There is no one I can think of except the person who addressed himself Zhu Duqing." Gu Shijio was stunned by his reply and said, "In fact, my dream was very vague. There seemed to be two men playing a game of chess. They seemed to be opponents who had known each other for a long time. The way one of the persons played chess was very similar to the way you rearranged the starry array." Di Fui's heart moved. Perhaps she had dreamed of him. It would seem that he still had another identity. Moreover, this identity was perhaps even more superior to his current one as he could play chess using the stars. As for the man in black, since he could play chess with him, perhaps his skill was also very good, so his status should be about the same as him. Maybe they were even friends. Di Fui had played chess many times and never met a real opponent. His current father was a master of chess. However, Di Fui was still young and had not recovered his memory yet. So far, every time he had played chess with Shenjiuli, he was always defeated. However, if he played with Shenjiuli now, it was tough to tell who was better. Was the man in black Zhu Duqing? Perhaps, for some reason, they had become enemies? Otherwise, why would he have worked on such an elaborate plan to defeat him? Even Shenjiuli and his wife were almost trapped by him, and almost lost control of the entire celestial devil continent. Some ordinary person could not have done it. In a way, the identity of the man in black should be higher than Shenjiuli and his wife. Of course, that being said, he too must have possessed a higher status in his past life. Shenjiuli was already a god that was nurtured by nature. He was highly respected and was the executor of heavenly law. The only thing that could control him was the heavenly law. Di Fui originally thought that the heavenly laws naturally existed in the universe. However, it now seemed that someone was behind it, which was arguably the master of heavenly law. He looked at his hand and fingers in contemplation. He knew how to influence the stars in nature, and even manipulate the arrangement of some stars. Each star often represented someone who had an influence on the entire continent. Therefore, if he could play chess with the stars, by extrapolation, that meant that he could adjust the fate of certain people. And since he was playing chess with the stars with the man in black, it could mean that he was not the only person who could manipulate the fate of the people in the lower bound as well as the celestial devil continent. Apparently, he could manipulate more than one continent. Chapter 2599. A fight between father and son. 4. Was the man responsible for the fate of all the continents? Was he the master of heavenly law? Difui's fingers were tapping on the table, as he began to think through the obvious clues and gradually approach the truth. Just as this thought entered his mind, thunder could be heard in the sky, as if a heavenly secret had been exposed. Then he laughed. Gu Shizhou stood at the door to check on Di Hao, only to find him stretching his small arms and legs. She occasionally turned her head to observe Difui, and noticed that he was laughing at himself. So she asked him, "What are you laughing at?" Difui stood up and walked over to her. He then grabbed her waist and hugged her in his arms. "I was laughing because I realized that lifting rocks and dropping them on my own feet was actually quite painful." Gu Shizhou expressed to him that she did not understand what he meant. Unfortunately, Difui no longer explained himself. Instead, he asked her, "When should we leave?" Gu Shizhou asked him in return, "What is the progress of your recovery?" "I am almost done. I will not have a problem dismantling those starry arrays." "Okay, let's go now then. Unfortunately, I have a low level of skill right now and can't help you. Otherwise, I could dismantle a few of them on my own," Gu Shizhou said regretfully. Although Difui's skills were almost fully restored, her power remained stagnant and did not improve at all. She had no clue when she would return to her usual self. "If everything goes according to plan, I believe your spiritual power will return to you once the Shura world is restored back to normal." Gu Zijia's eyes lit up as she heard the good news from Difui. "What are we waiting for then? Let's go. Let's quickly dismantle the starry arrays." "I will go too." Di Hao jumped over and reached out to grab Gu Zijia's sleeve. Difui rolled up his sleeve and pulled him over. "Bad boy, don't trouble your mother." Naturally, they would bring him along since they came back to get him. Di Hao struggled out from his arms and said, "I want to bring little Xia." "Little Xia?" Di Hao raised his hand and whistled loudly. After a while, there was a white shadow that appeared in the distance. Soon a silver-white beast appeared in the yard. The animal was as big as a cow, while its posture was somewhat similar to a unicorn. Its eyes were as bright as the stars, and it looked mighty and strong. Xieji. It was the creature that Gu Shizhou once mistakenly thought was a silver wolf. She did not expect it to grow so big in such a short time. It was very affectionate when it walked around Gu Shizhou, with its head and tail swaying uncontrollably. Gu Shizhou patted it on its back and said, "Xiao Xia, you have grown so big. That's quite impressive. You can now carry your little master. In fact, if you can grow any bigger, you can even carry all three of us." Xieji immediately raised its head and let out a sound that sounded very much like a whistle. Its body seemed to be momentarily covered by a white light all of a sudden, and when the light dispersed, its stature had grown by almost twofold. It was now the size of an elephant. This creature could actually change its size at will. Great! Since Xieji had sincerely invited them all on its back, Difui and Gu Shizhou did not reject it. The family of three rode on the back of Xieji and headed out of the devil world toward the city. Whenever they reached a city, they would be welcomed by the people. The city owners did not even dare to say anything to them. They would obediently lead Difui and his son into the cave with the starry array, so that they could reconfigure the array and help the grievances to rest in peace. Only Difui and Di Hao would enter the caves. Gu Shizhou would not go in. It was because Difui said that there was too much resentment in the starry arrays, and it was not good for her baby, so he asked her to wait outside. As for Di Hao, Difui treated this kid as a man. A man must be trained since young. Moreover, he also wanted to indirectly prove to Gu Shizhou that he did treat Di Hao like his own son. At the very least, he would have taught him the secret of breaking the starry array. Chapter 2600. Pick up the soft persimmon and pinch him. Di Hao was unhappy. He was still a baby, after all. Therefore, he really felt that Difui was pushing him to the limits. In the starry array, those evil spirits were extremely fierce, especially when they saw this little young boy who looked like fresh meat. They screamed and rushed over to bite his flesh and drink his blood. This certainly made it a frightening experience for the young toddler. Although his father was always at the forefront, Those grievances were clearly afraid of his temperament, so they did not bother him. In fact, they would keep a safe distance from him at all times. Nonetheless, once he passed them, they became aggressive again. Such a soft little boy. It must be delicious to eat. The grievances were getting closer and closer to him as they spoke. His exposed skin is as fair as white jade. Is his body also this fair? There was a wretched grievance that attempted to tear his little robe. He is so small. I really want to swallow him. There was a grievance with a big mouth that was evidently approaching him. Father! Father! Di Hao shouted while he was busy handling the grievances that disturbed him, hoping his father would turn around and save him. Follow me. Di Fui did not turn back, but continued to move forward. Di Hao felt dismayed by the response he received. Was it really good for such a little baby to deal with these grievances alone? His legs were so short, and there were so many disturbances along the way. How could he keep up? Ha ha ha, little doll, nobody cares about you. Little doll, let me eat you in my mouth. You look like glutinous rice buns. You must be very sweet. This little doll is really handsome. His little face is so bouncy. The grievances grew even more arrogant over time. Many white scary arms stretched out toward Di Hao in an attempt to seize him. It was like a ghost jungle, with hands lunged at him from all directions, wanting to tear him into pieces. To make matters worse, there was a grievance that actually pulled his pants and tried to strip him of his clothes. Di Hao was furious. Bully the young kid. Picked up the soft persimmon and pinch him. The grievances continued to disturb the young boy. But did they really think it was so convenient to mess with him? All of a sudden, Di Hao stopped walking. His small fingers were pinched together as he cast a difficult spell. A long silver sword appeared instantly in his palm. He swung it and managed to chop off the arms of the evil spirits that bothered him, just like cutting cabbage. The grievances naturally did not expect such a little kid that seemed harmless to have such a powerful skill. Fortunately for them, although their arms were cut off, they could be restored in an instant. Being furious at the kid, they now decided to attack him collectively. Many shadows came from all directions and rushed towards Di Hao. These grievances had been shackled here for a long time, so their resentments were deep. Naturally, none of them were easy to deal with. Additionally, the array here was suitable for their growth. Each of them had spiritual power that was equivalent to that of a golden immortal. Due to their increased ferociousness, the temperature seemed to have dropped by a few degrees in the star formation. The dark space was now filled with terrifying ghostly howlings. Di Fui, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped. His fingers that were always inside his sleeves quickly pinched a spell. Nonetheless, he seemed to have sensed something, and his fingers slowly loosened. Behind him, he noticed that little Di Hao had a faint white light bursting out of his sleeves that seemed to surround the evil spirits that had attacked him. In an instant, the evil spirits seemed to turn into smoke once the white light covered them. In the distance, the other evil spirits that were preparing to join the battle to bully the kid became stunned. They finally understood that this little doll was a mighty baby. None of them dared to provoke him further. Chapter 2601. Why did no one teach you? Di Hao flicked his sleeves all over to get rid of the dust that he inadvertently touched. When he looked up, he saw that Di Fui was looking at him from nearby. The man was clearly in deep thought about something. Di Hao strolled over to him. Father. Di Fui smiled. Your skill is not bad. Then he added. It does not look like something me or your mother would have taught you. Di Hao bit his small mouth. Of course, I learned it without a teacher. Di Fui's heart sank. What must have happened in the future that he and Gu Shijiao did not teach their kid martial arts? Di Fui bent over and picked him up, and then strode forward. Why did no one teach you? Did you lose your parents? Were you kidnapped? Having Di Fui carry him was a rare experience for Di Hao. He finally felt some fatherly love. No. I have been an orphan since young. Di Fui was shocked and stared at him fixedly. He wanted to know more, but he also knew that he could not ask Di Hao. Otherwise, he would break a lot of heavenly laws and would attract another disaster. He held the child's arm tightly and smiled. How who gave you your name? My mother. Why didn't your father name you? Di Hao shook his head. I don't know. Perhaps he didn't have time? Di Fui was speechless. The amount of information that he was extracting from Di Hao's words was overwhelming. He took a deep breath and kissed him on his face. How you have a good name. Your mother must be very talented. Here, let me teach you how to reconfigure the starry array. Good. Di Hao was very obedient. He understood that his father had guessed something. Since Di Fui was explaining each step to him, he naturally took more time than before. Nonetheless, perhaps due to their blood bond, Di Hao managed to pick everything up rather quickly. In fact, he even applied his own set of unique techniques, which matched with those illustrated by Di Fui. Thus, the effect was actually stronger. When the process was almost done, Di Fui allowed Di Hao to practice what he had learned in the starry array. Together, the father and son began to reconfigure the array, and they managed to catch up on any delays from before. After sorting out the arrangements of the stars in the array, Di Fui needed to free the grievances in the array to be genuinely successful. However, he did not do so this time because these grievances had provoked his son. Those grievances that once disturbed Di Hao were all wiped out by Di Fui. Di Hao looked at Di Fui in awe and felt a warmth in his heart. It turned out that his father could also pamper him. Even though he was happy, he seemed to look down for a moment. He remembered the fact that he had traveled through space and time just to change the tragic fate of the future. In fact, it had changed a bit, right? He would give his father and mother a good life. This family of 4 could stay together for a long time. Anyone or anything would not be able to separate them anymore. He clenched his fists tightly at the thought of his new direction. Gu Shijie was waiting outside impatiently. She had accompanied Di Fui to break one starry array before, and she knew that he should have been done. Why was he taking so long? Just when she wanted to go in and check on the two, they emerged from the cave. Although it was rare for Di Fui to be late, what was even more surprising was the fact that he was carrying his son. They seemed to be talking and laughing happily. What happened? Gu Shijie raised her eyebrows while Di Hao looked up at her and turned to look at his father. Di Fui rubbed his hair and said, "Do you want your mother to carry you?" Di Hao nodded cautiously. Chapter 2602. If someone dared to hurt them, he would make sure to return the favor 100 times over. Di Fui was rarely so generous. He handed Di Hao to Gu Shijie as he said, "Be obedient. Don't try to be mischievous with us." Di Hao finally found himself in Gu Zijie's embrace. It was warm in his mother's arms, with a unique faint aroma that was different from his father's. He stretched out his small arm and gave Gu Shijie a big hug before saying, "Mother, let me go. I am already able to run. You are pregnant, and it is inconvenient for you to carry me. Don't hurt little sister Shiyue." He struggled out from Gu Zijie's arms and walked forward. Gu Shijie was rendered speechless by what the little boy had said. She turned to Di Fui and spoke. "It seems that you and your son have gotten really close. You have even told the little guy the name of our future daughter." Di Fui held her waist and walked forward with her. "I didn't say anything. This little guy can predict the future. He still has that ability. It seems things are not as simple as we thought. Of course, this kid is a genius. He can learn things very quickly. Did you teach him how to dismantle the starry array?" "Yes. I also taught him how to read the stars." Gu Shijie half-jokingly added, "This is your prime skill which should not be passed to anyone aside from your own children. Why were you willing to pass it on to this little kid? I like him and treat him as though he is my own son." Di Fui looked at the little boy, who was running around in front of him. A light smile appeared on his face, with his wife beside him and his son at the front. The warm sunshine that shone on their bodies created the shadow of a family of 3 on the ground. They were tall and short, and coincidentally crossing each other. It looked very pleasant. Despite the loving sight, Di Fui's facial expression suddenly turned serious. This was his family, the people he loved and cared for the most in his life. He would do whatever he could to make sure they did not have to suffer from any physical pain, or mourn the loss of their family members. As a man, he had to be strong enough to protect the kid around him, and the woman in his arms. If someone dared to hurt them, he would make sure to return the favor 100 times over. According to what Di Hao had said earlier, he had met with an accident when he was still young. It seems that Gu Shijio had not spent a lot of time with Di Hao back when he was a kid in his own timeline. Perhaps something might have happened to Gu Shijio. Otherwise, Di Hao would not have claimed that he was an orphan since he was a child. Now this fetus in Gu Zijia's body was going to be Di Hao's sister. Following from what he told Di Fudi, both Gu Shijio and himself had met with an accident after Di Hao was born. Based on his estimations, it might still be 2 to 3 years away from today. 2 to 3 years were enough for him to plan everything he needed. He planned to get rid of everything unfavorable to his family. At this point, the only thing that posed a threat to them was probably the black man who carried the identity of Zhu Duqing. It seemed that Di Fui still had to try to lure him out and get rid of him altogether. Quietly, Di Fui started to think of a way to lure him out. Well, who are you thinking about? Gu Shijio knew Di Fui very well, and she could detect the change in his emotions from some of his subtle movements. Di Fui laughed. I was thinking, Shijio, when do we want a second child? Gu Shijio was speechless. The first child was still a small fetus in her tummy, and he had already pondered about their second child. What happened? Why was he thinking so far ahead? It takes a lot of work to raise a child. Let's wait until the birth of this child before we think of the next one. We should raise this one first before considering a second child. Does that mean that after the birth of our daughter, I will have to wait a few years before having another kid? Of course. Do you want me to be pregnant all the time? Of course not. Di Fui suddenly lifted her joyfully and continued. I agree that we should not hurry. Let's wait for a few decades first. Gu Shijio remained silent. Chapter 2603. No, you are too ugly. That was too big a gap, which made Gu Shijio rather curious. Why? What do you mean? Gu Shijio did not speak, but just stared at him. Di Fui proceeded to kiss her on her eyes. Stupid. Having you pregnant has made my life so inconvenient. I naturally don't want our second child to come so soon. Gu Zijia's face was hot as she playfully pushed him away. Pervert. Di Fui merely laughed. Di Hao, who was some distance in front of them, could not help but glance back. He saw his father lovingly hugging his mother, which looked so beautiful as if it were a portrait. Except for the fact that he could feel the sweetness and warmth radiating from them. His eyes suddenly got a little teary, so he raised his hand and rubbed it. Coincidentally, it was at that moment that the family of 3 had just left the official residence of the previous city owner. The people outside automatically clustered themselves to both sides of the street to make way for them. They first heard the laughter of the Lord, which was magnetic and clear. It was so pleasant to hear that it could probably make their ears pregnant. Then they saw a little doll that looked soft and gentle run out, followed by a man in a white robe holding a woman in a green dress. The sharp-eyed people saw that the little doll's eyes were a bit red, and then looked at the Lord and his wife, who were behind the little baby. They inevitably felt resentful for the little baby. The little baby was still so young. It was at an age where his parents were naturally expected to carry him. Instead, they only saw his father busy entertaining his wife. It was child abuse. No wonder the baby felt as if he was wronged. There was a woman who could not bear to see it and stepped forward. She opened her arms to Di Hao and said, "Little kid, come, let me carry you." Di Hao quickly stepped back and looked at the woman. She was gorgeous and possessed a slender body figure. She was a famous beauty in this city who had never met any man who could match her. After she saw Di Fui, she was naturally attracted to the man. In fact, she suddenly felt that she had finally met her true love. Unfortunately, this godlike man had a beloved woman around him. She could tell that his eyes were full of love, and there was no space for another woman. How could she ever make an impression on such a person? Seeing little Di Hao teary-eyed gave her an idea. All she had to do now was to be courageous enough to offer to carry the little doll. Therefore, she planned to use Di Hao as a way for Di Fui to notice her existence. She unexpectedly rushed out, thinking that she could hold Di Hao in her arms, but had not predicted the little guy's reactions to be so fast. He stepped back in time and was able to dodge her arms. At this moment, the little guy's eyes were bright and watery. When he looked at her, there was a wave of light in his eyes that actually made her heart tremble. She smiled, revealing the most charming smile that she could, and said, "Baby, can I carry you?" She had half bent her body, but her face was still facing Di Fui from the side. She knew that she looked most beautiful from the side, especially when she smiled. Usually, it would catch the attention of any man. Sadly for the woman, Di Hao shook his head and replied, "No, you are too ugly." It came as an utter shock for the woman, whose face turned pale in an instant. What was wrong with the little guy's eyes? How could he claim that she was ugly? "Little guy, if I am ugly, who do you think is beautiful?" The woman asked unwillingly. "She is my mother." Di Hao's little hand was pointing at Gu Shijiu. Chapter 2604. Her husband was too attractive. The insulted woman could not help but look at the beauty in Di Fui's arms. At first, the woman could not see her appearance because Gu Shijiu was not facing her. However, it was probably Di Hao's movement that caught her attention and made her turn to them. As the woman finally managed to see Gu Shijiu, her pretty face instantly turned pale. Although she was undoubtedly beautiful, she was like a firefly while Gu Shijiu was like the moon. It was unreasonable to compare the two. Embarrassed, she turned and rushed back into the crowd to hide. Gu Shijiu's lips were slightly curved at the corners. She did not expect little Di Hao to dismiss such a peach for his father in just a few words. Her husband was too attractive. It was completely expected for him to have a few peaches come his way. Instead of waiting for Di Fui to say something witty, she openly hugged his neck to declare her ownership of the man. No other woman should waste their time pursuing him. The family of three went directly into a restaurant to eat. An elegant room was prepared early for them, and the restaurant's best chefs made a table full of delicious dishes for them. Since the starry array had been completely dismantled, the city's sky now had rays of long-lost sunshine. Joyful scenes filled the streets around the city. While eating, Di Fui received updates from his subordinates. As Di Fui had only destroyed the starry arrays in 3 cities, his subordinates were guarding the other starry arrays to prevent Zhu Duqing from attacking them. However, no one had seen Zhu Duqing. Meanwhile, Quan Shui had met with Yin Yanli since the big battle. Quan Shui raised his hand to greet the man despite all the troubles he had gone through. Yin Yanli just nodded to him to acknowledge and walked past him. I think that Yin Yanli is also looking for Zhu Duqing to get his revenge. I hope that he doesn't find him. Since he is alone, I am afraid Zhu Duqing will kill him. Di Fui only answered briefly before ending the conversation. Gu Shijiu listened for a moment and asked Di Fui, "Where do you think Zhu Duqing is hiding?" "In fact, I am somewhat puzzled. I thought that once his conspiracy was exposed, he would sneak into the starry arrays of the other cities and create a mess. But he hasn't." Di Fui pondered for a moment, but did not answer her question. Instead, he raised his hands and placed a chessboard on the table. He passed her the black pieces. "Do you remember how the 2 people in the dream played chess? Let's imitate it, shall we?" Gu Shijiu raised her eyebrow. "What? If you can remember, try to imitate how the man in black made his moves. The more you can remember, the better." Gu Shijiu bit her lips. "I can remember every move." This time, it was Di Fui's turn to be shocked. "Really? There are usually more than 100 pieces. There were normally 361 pieces, 180 white and 181 black pieces. Therefore, Di Fui could not fathom how she could remember everything." Gu Shijiu raised her head high and confirmed, "I remember the whole game of chess. Their game had more than 500 pieces, and was much more complicated." Di Fui remained silent. "Can you still remember the arrangement of the pieces on the board?" "Of course." Swiftly, Di Fui placed his hand on the board to erase its markings. "Draw it again." Gu Shijiu did not hesitate to comply with his request. Chapter 2605. How can I be your mother if I am not powerful? Di Hao was now full from his meal at the restaurant. He came next to Gu Shijiu to observe what she was doing. Secretly, he really admired his mother for being so talented. Being able to remember the exact chessboard and pieces was something out of this world. Although Gu Shijiu had somehow forgotten the specific conversation between the 2 people in her dream, She strangely remembered the entire layout of the complicated game, and how it unfolded. In just a brief moment, Gu Shizhou was able to carve out the chessboard and explain the rules of the game to Difui. As the rules were quite complicated, Gu Shizhou thought that she might need to repeat the rules to him at least 2 to 3 times. It was certainly beyond her expectation that after having only explained 1/3 of the rules, Difui already began to play the game. No need to go on. I understand it. Let's start. He was indeed the former master of the heavenly law. Even if he had lost his memories, some of the motor skills were still in his bones. Hence, he understood the nature of the game after only listening to a few parts of the instruction. Without wasting any more time, the two of them started playing a game together. Gu Shizhou played the black pieces in the precise way that the man in black played it in her dream. She purposely wanted to see if Difui would be able to beat the man in black from her dream. The room went quiet, and there was only the sound of the chess pieces falling on the board. Dihao silently looked at them. He found that his father's way of playing chess was slightly different from before. In the dream, the master of heavenly law was decisive in eliminating his opponent's pieces and blocking all the possible routes of his opponent. He gave up any chess pieces that he needed to win the match. He had the determination to sweep through everything that blocked his path to victory. Also, he had no personal feelings invested in the game. His bold moves and sacrifices had won him the game before. The manner in which Difui played the game this round showed that he had a different temperament. He would try to keep many pieces as possible and played rather conservatively. Nonetheless, when he needed to give up a piece, he would not hesitate to do so. As for Gu Shizhou, no matter how Difui played, she just followed the steps of the man in black. When this game went down to the wire, Difui actually lost. He lost. Gu Shizhou looked up at him in utter shock. She expected him to win because the master of the heavenly law had won. Perhaps, although he knew the rules of the game, he was still inexperienced. These few moves had cost you the game. You should have. Gu Shizhou subconsciously picked up his white pieces and told him how to win. Difui smiled and looked at her. He did not talk but watched how she rearranged the white pieces step by step in the way she remembered. It was such a complicated game, and so he watched her in admiration. Even Dihao also fully respected her. Although he was in the dream with Gu Shizhou, he did not remember the game so well. He was certain that he would not be able to replicate the game. This made him wonder who Gu Shizhou might have been in her previous life. After a few minutes, Gu Shizhou finally finished putting the black and white pieces back on both sides. White was supposed to win. Difui turned a cup in his hand and looked at the game unfold step by step. He seemed to be thinking of something. Gu Shizhou noticed this, but did not bother him and let him slowly ponder about what he was thinking of. "Mother, your memory is too good. I have never met anyone like you." Dihao took an orange and began to peel it. He put some pieces in Gu Zijia's hand and continued. "You are too powerful." Gu Shizhou smiled. "How can I be your mother if I am not powerful?" Chapter 2606. Would he give up so easily? Gu Shizhou was certainly delighted by Dihao's sweet words. Furthermore, after finding out that Difui was the master of the heavenly law, she somehow viewed him as a saint that had too high a status for her. Undoubtedly, she felt a little inferior in her heart. Nonetheless, that inferiority was gone. She was more certain of herself and her abilities. In some respects, she was even more skilled than Difui. Gu Shizhou in a good mood, so she carried Dihao and placed him on her lap. "How you are still young. Don't have to serve me. Come, tell me what you want to eat. I will peel it for you." The little kid's mother was so loving and gentle. Dihao lifted his hand and grabbed a handful of melon seeds, and placed it in Gu Zijia's hand. "Mom, let's eat this together." Although this was a very kind gesture, Gu Shizhou remained silent as she pondered. This situation was very familiar to her. It was as if she saw it unfold for the second time. Nevertheless, subconsciously, she had started peeling the seeds for Dihao. Difui suddenly spoke. "I think that Zhu Duqing must have left the Shura world." "What?" Gu Shizhou was surprised and raised her eyebrows. She looked at him to see if he was serious. She thought that he was occupied with the chessboard. Why did he suddenly talk about Zhu Duqing? Do you think he has given up? Gu Shijiu asked. This person had masterminded such an extensive plan and spent so much effort in the Shura world to see it through. Would he give up so easily? Di Fui explained. By observing his style of playing chess, this person is good at camouflaging himself. Every move he makes seems to be harmless, but is hiding a potent attack. Everything is somehow connected in a complicated way. Once he confirms that his plan is exposed, he will not hesitate to abandon everything and throw away all his pieces to start again. From the moves he made in the game, we can infer his style of action. Since his conspiracy has been exposed, the people will refuse to follow him, and Yun Yanli will not listen to him anymore. If he stays here, it will not help him go back to his original plan. Therefore, it is very likely that he would have abandoned everything. It turned out that he asked her to imitate the man in black, so that he was able to study his strategies and predict his next move. He had always analyzed people from unexpected aspects, and he had done so again today. Gu Shijiu knew that Di Fui's analysis was always accurate. He had never had a mistake, so she breathed a sigh of relief. She thought that Zhu Duqing would stay behind in the Shura world to wait for an opportunity to attack them. Now it seemed that this worry was superfluous. They could reconfigure the starry arrays and set the Shura world back to the right path. As it turned out, Di Fui's analysis was correct. They never saw Zhu Duqing even when the starry array in the Shura world was taken down. This man had disappeared, and no one had seen him. As the last starry array was dismantled, a strong breeze seemed to blow through the entire place and clear out the haze that covered all the cities here. There is spiritual power. Gosh. There is spiritual power now. I can feel the spiritual power between the sky and the earth. Great. We don't have to hunt the beasts anymore. We can freely absorb the essence of the world. Long live the Lord. Long live Miss Gu. When the people saw the clear sky again and felt the spiritual energy of the land, they were clearly ecstatic. People cheered and jumped around on the street. They held each other and danced. Some even cried while others tried to wipe away their tears of joy. The alpha males even ripped off their shirts to express their excitement. They shouted and ran around the street half naked. As for Gu Shijiu, when the first spiritual power of the earth appeared, her whole body shone with a bright light that seemed to pull her into the air. Chapter 2607. Leaving Di Hao was stunned. Mother. Was his mother being struck by lightning? Di Fui grabbed him aside and said, "Don't be nervous. Your mother's skills are returning to her." Di Hao's eyes lit up as he looked up into the air. Gu Shijiu was still absorbed inside the white light, with her eyes closed. Fortunately, it did not look like she was in pain. After a while, the white seemed to burst into the air, while Gu Shijiu gracefully returned to the ground in a white outfit with a faint auspicious light behind her body. Apparently, it was the standard outfit donned by a great deity. Everyone in the crowd was in awe of what they had seen. Di Hao's eyes lit up too as he watched his mother majestically make her way down. As for Di Fui, he had a broad smile on his face, but it soon changed. Quickly, he leaped into the air towards her and said, "Be careful." Apparently, there was an oversized vortex behind Gu Shijiu. Upon observation, the whirlpool seemed to be made of circles of purple, red and yellow. Later, Di Fui realized that it consisted of 7 colors. The center of the vortex was bright red and looked extraordinarily eye-catching. Although it had caught everyone's attention, no one was prepared for what happened next. Even Gu Shijiu did not have time to look back as her body was sucked into the portal-like structure. She disappeared in the blink of an eye. "Shijiu." Di Fui called for her as he rushed forward. He was moving forward at breakneck speed, but the vortex disappeared too quickly. Di Fui and Di Hao were stunned while everyone in the crowd remained silent. It was so quiet that all they could hear was the gentle breeze in the air. Once the vortex had disappeared, the sky was clear again, and the Shura world had been restored to its usual tranquility. Everything was back to normal except for the woman in white who was swallowed by the colorful vortex. When the incident occurred, the 8 guardians of the Devil Kingdom were all present. Disbelieving, they felt as though they had been struck by lightning as they stood and looked at one another. Meanwhile, Di Fui levitated in the air at the location where the vortex had appeared before. The wind blew across his robes fiercely. Feng Ruhua and the rest finally came to their senses and quickly ordered their soldiers to search for Gu Shijiu. You don't have to look for her. She has already left the Shura world. Difui finally gave his input. It was a heavenly punishment to send her into the Shura world. Now that the Shura world had returned to normal, it was time for her to return to where she had come from. Di Hao quickly went to Difui's side and asked, "Father, what do we do now?" Difui took a deep breath as he responded, "Well, we naturally have to leave." Before he came to the Shura world, Shenjuli had told him the way to leave this place. The method was somewhat complicated as it was necessary to prepare a range of items. It could take at least 2 years to collect all the necessary materials. The Devil King had been here for more than a year and had collected some of the elements along the way, but there were still a few essential materials that he could not obtain until the Shura world returned to normal. Difui would need to wait for another year for those materials to grow. His original plan was to travel around the Shura world with his wife and kid once he successfully dismantled the last starry array. He could pick up any treasures here for his daughter during his travels. He only planned on bringing them back to the upper bound after his daughter was born. After all, the technique consumed a lot of spiritual power, and the process was intense. It was not safe for Gu Shijiu to travel during her pregnancy, or even when the child was too young. As expected, his plan was very thorough. He had even thought of the places that he wanted to bring his family here in the Shura world. All the more reason why he was left so stunned when things changed so abruptly. Chapter 2608. Leaving too in the spur of the moment, Difui remembered something that Gu Shijiu had told him before. It seemed that the last time she was pulled into the whirlpool, she felt like she fell into a sea of knives that slashed her body thousands of times. She thought that perhaps it was because of the excruciating pain that she had lost her memory when she came to the Shura world. From what she had shared, it could be inferred that Gu Shijiu would experience a painful journey back in the colorful vortex. Difui was especially concerned for her because she was now pregnant with their child. He was not sure if she would suffer a miscarriage. The man's fingers were tightly clenched under his sleeves. He heaved a sigh and flew toward the top of a nearby temple in the distance. What had happened? What did the Lord discover? Just when the crowd was about to rush to the temple to check on what Difui had found, they saw a flash of light on the top of the temple. A majestic cold figure suddenly appeared in the air wearing faded white clothes. It was somewhat dirty as well, which made it seem as though this person had worn it for some time. In fact, one of the person's sleeves was missing. There was beard stubble around the person's lips, which made him look rather haggard. It was Yin Yanli. He was no longer as proud and arrogant as before. In actuality, he looked very much like an old and lonely man. Difui had noticed him earlier, even though he used an invisibility spell to hide himself. He did not bother the man, and let him watch as everything unfolded. However, now that Gu Shijiu was gone, he immediately exposed Yin Yanli's presence. "Difui, what are you doing?" Yin Yanli sounded cold. Although he was forced out by Difui, he was not panicked. Instead, he sneered. "Do you think that I am the one who created the colorful whirlpool that took her away? Don't think so highly of yourself. You don't have this ability yet." Difui interrupted him. Yin Yanli choked on his words and sneered again. "Why have you exposed my presence? Do you intend to treat me as your punching bag?" Difui was too lazy to beat around the bush. He went straight to the point. "Tell me the fastest way to leave the Shura world. I believe that you know of a way. Please don't change the topic." Yin Yanli remained silent. He did know the way. After all, he had gone back and forth many times. But why would he tell him? Although he learned that his parents had died because of Zhu Duqing, he still blamed the incident on the divine couple. Despite Difui's help to free their souls from despair, Yin Yanli was not ready to help him that easily. Moreover, Difui had made him lose an arm not too long ago. He looked up and condescendingly spoke. "I know the way out, but why would I tell you?" Difui squinted his eyes at the man, but did not respond. Yin Yanli continued. "Of course, you can cut my other arm off or simply kill me. I don't care. None of those methods are going to make me reveal the way out." Obviously, Yin Yanli had now become emotionless. He was no longer afraid of death. Perhaps, he was no longer afraid of anything. People who had nothing to lose were the hardest to negotiate a deal with. Kuan Shui originally wanted to jump in and say a few words. However, since Yin Yanli spoke in such an unhelpful manner, he simply smacked his head instead. The onlookers had now regarded Di Fui as their savior. As for Yin Yanli, most people still hated him. They still blamed him for using the starry arrays for his own benefit. He had plagued many innocent lives. Seeing his unwillingness to help Di Fui certainly made them infuriated. Many had cursed him from below, branding him as an ungrateful person. Chapter 2609, Leaving 3. The crowd had clearly picked their side as they continued to bombard Yin Yanli with their dissatisfaction. However, no matter what was said about him, he looked indifferent. It seemed as though he was really numb to the core. He only stared at Di Fui and smiled at his current predicament. Finally, he was able to watch the man suffer. Nonetheless, Di Fui did not let him enjoy this feeling for long. He signaled his subordinates, and Feng Ruhua emerged with a person in the crowd. This person was none other than the young palace master. How she carried herself as somewhat awkward, as she had tried to keep a low profile by dressing like an ordinary village girl. Being monitored by the 8 guardians, they knew that she had been frantically searching for her master. Due to the terrible image that she now had among the people, she was afraid that they would recognize her, so she disguised herself appropriately to stay under the radar. Her endless search left her miserable and pale, as she could not sleep or eat well over the past few days. Once she was made aware that Di Fui and Gu Shijie were going to dismantle the last starry array, she predicted that Yin Yanli would be there to witness it. After all, the man's last few years had been dedicated to building and protecting these arrays. She knew that he would want to be there to see it. That sparked a glimmer of hope in her heart and brought her here. As she made her way through the crowd, she could not sense Yin Yanli's presence, which left her disappointed. It was beyond her expectations that Di Fui would expose him. She resisted the urge to reach out to him, and hid in the crowd first to assess the situation. Nevertheless, if Yin Yanli were to be in danger, she would surely rush forward to save him, even if she had to sacrifice her life. Unfortunately for the young palace master, before the opportunity presented itself, someone had already patted her from behind. Her limbs went numb as she turned slowly to the back to see that Feng Ruhua had found her. Seconds later, she was pushed out of the crowd. The snake that was wrapped around Feng Ruguo's wrist was now wrapped around her neck, and the snake's head was slowly approaching her carotid artery. The young palace master had no doubts that this snake could take away her life. Yin Yanli slightly frowned at what he had seen. Di Fui, why have you gotten her involved? To threaten you. Di Fui was straightforward. You are now the lord, yet you still resort to such filthy methods. I can be more filthy. Yin Yanli was somewhat surprised by his frankness. He sneered condescendingly as he continued. Who do you think she is? She is just a better dog among my lousy subordinates. Do you think that I would be threatened by you because of a dog? The young palace master's pretty face turned pale in an instant. She disbelievingly looked at Yin Yanli and trembled. Did he really think of her as a dog? He clearly said that she was his friend, and he even promised to marry her someday. Was all that a lie? The eyes of the young palace master turned reddish as she stared at Yin Yanli intensely. Yin Yanli did not look at her. Perhaps he simply could not. The young palace master finally spoke. Yin Yanli, do you really treat me as your dog? Yin Yanli closed his eyes and did not answer her question. However, his silence had already revealed his answer. The young palace master grew desperate. She sneered. Well, you have certainly fooled me. Suddenly, she kneeled, opened her mouth, and wanted to bite the red snake that was hovering over her cheeks. The red snake was very poisonous, and it would certainly be fatal to her if she had taken a bite of it. Seeing her current intention, it was clear that she was looking for death. Yin Yanli's facial expression changed when he noticed what was going on down below, and he seemed to move slightly. However, Di Fui responded faster than him. He appeared to fire something toward the head of the red snake that had its mouth wide open in front of the young palace master's face. As a result, the young palace master failed to bite the snake in her first attempt. Fortunately, Feng Ruhua was nearby and managed to seal her acupuncture point to prevent the young palace master from taking her own life again. Chapter 26:10. Leaving 4. Yun Yanli's reaction had clearly shown that he genuinely cared for the young palace master. He did not want to see her die at the very least. He took a quick look at Di Fui, and they seemed to have reached a mutual understanding without any exchange of words. The two of them were both very smart men. Naturally, they understood each other's positions. Yun Yanli let out a long sigh but was finally ready to compromise. I can take you there, but you must promise me something in return. State your request. When you finally find Zhu Duqing, allow me to join the fight. Are you sure that you are giving yourself a reason to die? There would certainly be an earth-shattering battle between Di Fui and Zhu Duqing. It would certainly be unsafe for any ordinary people to join. Without an arm, Yun Yanli would be a handicapped fighter. His involvement would spell his inevitable death. He pinched his lips into a thin line and took a few swings with his left arm. I did not tell you that I am actually left-handed. I am better at wielding my sword with my left hand. If you do not believe me, we can have a quick spar right now. Di Fui was reluctant to fight him. The only thing he wanted now was to return to heaven as soon as he could, so he agreed to the condition. Yun Yanli seemed relieved. Great. This time, I am coming with you. Master, I shall go with you. Master, I too shall go with you. Feng Ruhua and her men all volunteered themselves to follow Di Fui and assist him in the final battle with the Black Bamboo Man. However, Di Fui refused their requests. These guardians were natives from the Shura world, specifically the Devil Kingdom. They would not be able to adapt to the living conditions in heaven as the celestial aura could possibly be lethal to them. Besides, Feng Ruhua dared not go against his commands, so she gave the rest of the guardians a quick, helpless look before retreating. Don't forget me. I have had enough of this lousy place. Master, take me with you. Kuan Shui firmly said while stepping forward with Di Hao in his hand. Di Hao was also taking Xie with him. Since the gentlemen had reached an agreement, Feng Ruhua quickly set the young palace master free by unblocking her acupuncture points. The hostage was no longer needed. Ming Dai, I am no longer your master. You need not follow me around anymore. Yun Yanli had to make it clear to her once and for all. Unfortunately for her, he was never attracted to the young palace master. She was merely a tool in his plan. She had always been a loyal companion to him. As time went by, their friendship was slowly built. But friendship was all that he had for her. Moreover, he had failed his mission and no longer had the desire to conquer the world. Hence, he could not fulfill his promise to make her the future celestial concubine. It would be better to set her free, he thought. The young palace master's face grew pale. She knew how serious Yun Yanli was whenever he made a statement. Although she was unhappy with his decision, she did not refute it. Helplessly, she watched as Yun Yanli performed a spell and opened up a passage to heaven. Slowly, his figure faded in the light until he finally disappeared entirely. The young palace master simply looked down in disappointment with her fists clenched. Don't you want to follow them? Feng Ruhua approached her and asked. He did not let me. Silly, how can you give up just because of what he said? This is not the right way to pursue a man. You need to pursue the man tirelessly. It is easy for a woman to attract the heart of a man. Feng Ruhua said in a comforting manner while playing the role of an elder sister. But, no buts. I just need to know if you want to go after him or not. I want to, but I do not have enough power to open up the passage. It does not matter, as long as you know the way, we can do the rest, Feng Ruhua continued to persuade her. It seems that you are the one who wants to go along. The young palace master finally realized her intention. Smart. We are not doing it solely for you. So are you in? The young palace master took some time to think about the proposition. Yes, she finally said. Feng Ruhua was happy with her answer. Great. We'd better start now. Let's begin. The young palace master shook her head. Not now, we need some specific things to activate the passage. I need to collect the materials. Meet me here in 10 days. As long as they were able to leave the place, the guardians were willing to see out the 10 days. Chapter 26:11. Returning Dam. It was Gu Zijia's first word after being swallowed by the vortex. She was not against the idea of returning to where she came from, but a warning would have been appreciated as she needed to take Di Fui and little Di Hao along with her. All alone, she was spinning at high speed in the whirlpool, as if venturing into a high-tech washing machine. This time, the sensation she felt was not as bad as before. Also, her spiritual power was not reduced at all. The only unbearable thing was the fact that she had to spin through the entire process. There was no way she could leave the vortex, so she could only submit to providence. Intuitively, she placed her hands on her tummy securely to make sure that nothing would happen to the baby. She assumed that she would be taken back to the place in which she had come from, and frankly did not mind. At least, she would get to reunite with the muscle and Lu Wu. She had missed them dearly. The muscle, too, missed her very much. It had been crying every day since her unplanned departure. As soon as she returned to the celestial devil continent, she planned to go straight to them. Then she would visit Long Sai before returning to the starry crescent land. She had been away for 2 years now and was worried that something might have happened, though she certainly hoped not. After all, in the modern days, the earth seemed to be doing fine without a lord. Dong! Gu Shijie was shocked by a sudden splash of water. Soon, she found herself drenched. Her eyes went blurry as she started to feel dizzy from the impact. Fortunately, her spiritual power as a great deity managed to keep her alive. She opened her eyes and saw a lengthy blue river with sparkling water that tasted bad. It was somehow both salty and bitter. Nevertheless, it was a familiar taste, seawater. But which sea was she at? The only sea in the celestial devil continent was the Luosha Sea. Was she really there? She wondered why she did not remember falling from the sky this time. How did she end up in the water right away? She had not even seen how the sky looked like. Upon impact, she had already found herself more than 10 meters underwater. As a good swimmer, she intuitively started swimming towards the surface as soon as she was thrown into the sea. Splash! 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 From a distance, something started to drift towards her at the speed of light. She focused her attention on the fast-moving figures and could immediately recognize them. Those figures had crystal blue hair and seemed to be wearing some body-hugging wetsuits. The most noteworthy part about them was their beautiful fishtails. They were indeed some really beautiful mermaids. She never knew that mermaids existed in the celestial devil land. Before Gu Shijie could make up her mind, the mermaids were already swimming by her side in a very anxious manner. Quick! Quick! They are here to catch us again. One of the mermaids quickly warned her. Who was the mermaid referring to? Were the celestial beings here so bored that they started messing with the mermaids? It did not seem very likely. Although the mermaids lived with the fishes, they were actually considered more like humans. Mermaids certainly shared the same level of intelligence as them at the very least. Nevertheless, being new here, Gu Shijie was pretty much confused. She watched as the mermaids swiftly swam away. Gu Shijie did not follow them. Instead, she started swimming in the opposite direction. She needed to find out more about the people who were going after those mermaids. Also, she needed more information about her current location. After swimming 2 or 3 meters, she stopped abruptly and gasped in disbelief. Chapter 26:12. Returning. 3 other mermaids were swimming nearby as a large fishnet was shot at them. It would appear that the mermaids were hotly pursued. A fishnet was undoubtedly not a strange thing to see at sea, but a fishnet that was installed with both tracking and navigation systems was definitely unusual. The fishnet was traveling just as fast as the mermaids, like a torpedo, and the mermaids were about to fall into the trap. Help! The mermaids were desperate, so they called out to Gu Shijie for help. Gu Shijie noticed their state of despair and decided to teleport to them right away. Unfortunately, she ended up being a prey in the net as well, along with the other mermaids. As soon as they were caught in the net, they were pulled back up. Splash! The net was finally out of the water, and alas, Gu Shijio could see daylight. What she saw next almost stunned her. She could not quite believe her eyes. It was a ship. Even though ships were the most common sight at sea, the one that she had just encountered was not quite the same. Instead of a sailing vessel, the ship actually resembled a giant spaceship that was afloat. Accurately speaking, it was not in contact with water. Instead, it was hovering above the surface of the water. What kind of ship was it? Could it be a hovercraft? A hovercraft would still come into contact with water, however. Furthermore, the vehicle in front of her was many times larger than a typical hovercraft. The ship looked more like an unidentified flying object that she was once told about. Dozens of armed men made their ways out of the cabin at once on noticing the catch. Gu Shijio was shocked at the sight of these armed men. Her heart thumped with astonishment as her mind went deeper into her thoughts. Had she gone back to the modern days? The armed men looked just like the people of the special forces. Without a doubt, these armed men were foreigners, as all of them were blonde with a prominent nose, and they had bluish-green eyes. Noticeably, they were all quite good-looking. One of them was carrying a small controller in his hand. With a flip and a press of the button, the net was then lifted onto the ship. Soon Gu Shijio and the mermaids found themselves being threatened at gunpoint. Today's catch is good. We have got 3, enough for all of us to savor. Hey, there is also a 2-legged goat. A 2-legged goat? Gu Shijio had not been so humiliated in a long while. She squinted in disapproval and carefully observed the man, and the gun that he was holding. The weapon looked very modern and fancy, however she had never seen it before. Since Gu Shijio used to be an assassin, guns were some of the most common things in her life. She could fire almost any gun accurately. She was also skilled at putting a gun's pieces back together, even with her eyes closed. The gun in the hands of the captors looked like the most powerful gun she had heard of, the AKM. However, the body of the gun was so narrow that it did not seem like it could fire a bullet through the hole. What kind of gun was it? She took another look at the ship, and was quite convinced by a crazy idea. She suspected that she had traveled through time and landed somewhere in the future. Everything seemed even more advanced than she could remember from back in her days in the modern world. As soon as the net was open, the 3 mermaids found themselves on the deck and started trembling in fear. One of them made a desperate attempt to escape by taking a leap into the water, but the men on the deck were not ready to let her go. Quick off the mark, one of them pulled the trigger to release a flash of blinding red light at the mermaid. He had an excellent aim and went for the mermaid's head. Obviously, he wanted her dead. Chapter 26:13, Returning 3, Swoosh. A shadow flashed before his eyes and disappeared along with the mermaid. The man gasped in disbelief as his companions were already exclaiming, "It is the 2-legged goat!" The person who rescued the mermaid was certainly Gu Shijio. At this moment, she was standing gracefully on the deck with the mermaid secured in her left arm. All the guns were now pointed at her. She swept her eyes across these armed men, and continued to wonder where she could be at this moment. Unexpectedly, she was alarmed by the mermaid's sudden question. "My lord." Her voice was filled with an equal amount of surprise and wonder. Gu Shijio was still in shock, so she did not know how to respond. "Are you our lord? I have heard about your teleportation skills. You must be the lord." "My lord, you are finally back. Please help us all." The other 2 mermaids chimed in. A glimmer of hope could be seen in their eyes. She noticed that they had addressed her as their lord. Does that mean she traveled back to Starry Crescent Land instead of the future? Mermaids did exist in Starry Crescent Land too. In fact, they were deeply related to Gu Shijio. After Difui's immortalization, Gu Shijio assumed his role as the lord and managed to unify the fragmented sea clans as one, which included the mermaids. Gu Shijio studied the mermaids and was further reassured by their outfits. They dressed like the people of Blue Hill Continent. "Are you Lan Yeagang's people?" Gu Shijio asked. Yes, my lord. We are the people of Blue Hill Continent. Our master has been waiting for your return. Please, save us all from this misery. Many of us have been caught." The 3 mermaids fell onto the ground and bowed before her mighty presence. And with all the recent revelations, Gu Shijie was now certain that she did not travel to the future. Nonetheless, she still could not make sense of the flying vehicle and the special forces. So, you are the lord that they have been endlessly talking about. Ah, the lord is only a little girl. The girl is pretty. Little lady lord, your dress looks exquisite. I bet you will look even better without these clothes. Come, let me give you a hand and help you undress. One of the men with big earrings stood out while laughing. As soon as he was finished with the harassment, he reached out his hand in a brave attempt to touch Gu Zhijia's face. Even though he was bold, he was still cautious. While reaching out to Gu Shijie, he was still holding his gun with his finger resting on the trigger. He had to make sure that he held Gu Shijie at gunpoint, for if he encountered the slightest resistance, he would pull the trigger. Before he could fire his gun, he was distracted by a sudden, sharp pain on his wrist. In the next second, his wrist had already been cut off, and the gun in his hand had been taken away too. The rest of the people were shocked by what they had seen. They did not hesitate to kill, so they all fired at Gu Shijie at once. Dozens of guns fired with great splendor, like fireworks, all aimed at the place where Gu Shijie just landed. They clearly saw that she landed, but she had also abruptly disappeared in a split second. The next thing they knew was that all of their hands had been cut off, and that their guns were seized. By the time they could react, they were already empty-handed. Bang! Bang! Many guns could be heard firing at the same time, followed by the armed men screeching in agony. Their own guns injured every member of the special forces. Their knees and wrists both suffered from gun wounds. Helplessly, they knelt on the ground. Across the deck, Gu Shijie was standing firmly right in front of them, surrounded by a pile of guns. Those were the guns that she had seized from the armed men. In her hand she was holding one too. Chapter 26:14. Returning for. The special forces all looked at her in disbelief while she continued to toil the gun in her hand like a professional. Do you even know how to use a gun? When I learned how to use this, all of you were still babies, crawling around in your mother's wombs. Gu Shijie did not seem to hold back her professional qualities. Her aura was certainly intimidating and unrelenting. It is time for me to question you. Where did you come from? Why did you come here and make my people suffer? The armed men looked at each other confusedly. They knew that spells and magic existed, but the people they encountered were usually not strong enough to resist their advanced weapons, so they never really cared. Never had they thought that the Lord, whom everyone kept talking about, was an expert in the use of guns. From the way she carried one, they were all convinced. Although they were injured, the armed men refused to surrender, and continued to give in to Gu Zhijie's request. Getting tired of their games, she shot one of the men right in the head. He fell to the ground and was lifeless. Answer my questions, or you will end up just as same, she warned while throwing another look at them. The woman was too cruel for them to play games with. Therefore, all of the armed men finally stopped messing around. One of them seemed to be sneakily reaching into his boots, and was ready to retrieve the small gun that was kept hidden. However, he could not find it. Are you looking for this? Gu Shijie kicked aside a short, golden gun that was the size of a lipstick. The officer's face went pale. Quickly, the others reached into their boots as well, only to find that their weapon had been taken away. The woman was obviously not a mortal. Other than the guns in their hands before, she had seized all of their hidden firearms as well. She must possess some compelling kung fu moves too, they thought. We are from the year 2348. We are here to conquer the land. Lady, I reckon you must come from planet Earth. Have you time traveled here? You are really good with guns. Nevertheless, since we are all from the same planet, we should help each other out. How can you abandon your own kind to save these mermaids? Lady, it is best that you let us go. If the Admiral knows about this, he will surely be unhappy. You and your people are bound to suffer. Lady, I am telling you that we have almost conquered the entire land. Some stubborn ones are still resisting, but they will be dead soon. A wise woman should submit to fate and adapt her actions to the times. You should not make us your enemies. Gu Shijie quietly listened to their attempt to persuade her. Aside from a lot of useless information, she was able to come to a few conclusions. Firstly, these men had indeed come from the future. Almost a year ago, they invaded the place. The ship in the shape of a flying object was one of their means of transportation. Secondly, the admiral was the highest person in command, with the final aim to conquer the entire Starry Crescent land and enslave every inhabitant. Thirdly, the men that she had encountered were amongst the weakest of the troops. They had been assigned with the worst type of weapons, and with no experience in any sort of tactical operations. Their only mission was to hunt down the mermaids, as the mermaids' tears would turn into pearls, and their meat tasted good, which the leaders had a liking for. Also, mermaids' oil could make good fuel. In the past year, they had slaughtered thousands of mermaids, almost driving the beautiful species to extinction. Furthermore, almost all the people of the Starry Crescent land were either killed or imprisoned. The prisoners would be turned into slaves with no freedom or rights. The men had to work day and night for their survival. Meanwhile, the women had to become sex slaves to the soldiers. Chapter 26:15. A massive tragedy. In conclusion, the situation was very much like the Japanese invasion in China. The invaders brazened into the land and acted brutally with the help of their advanced weapons. Gu Zijia's heart sank at the realization. Her 2-year absence from the Starry Crescent land had caused such a massive tragedy. The Starry Crescent land had been around for so many years, but was never visited by any foreign troops from the future. What brought them here this time? How did it happen? Gu Shijie once read about a sci-fi novel about the possibility of inventing a time-traveling machine that allowed travelers to venture from one time period to another. She did not quite believe the theory at first, but she did not doubt it now. Seeing was believing. The technological advancement in the year 2348 was beyond amazing. Occupied in her thoughts, she did not notice something that came from above. "My lord, look out!" one of the mermaids warned. Gu Shijie looked up and saw a round spiral vortex above her. The vortex sucked up all the armed men from the deck. Once it was done, the place was peaceful again for a second before a large green net fell on Gu Shijie and the mermaids. The net was made with a special material that was rather dense and firm, like a layer of soft metal. Gu Shijie tried to break the net with her bare hands, but did not manage to damage it. Instead, she could feel a steady flow of electricity on her fingertips as soon as she touched the metal. Without any spiritual power to protect her, she would pass out upon touching the electrified net. Fortunately for her, the sensation faded away as soon as she used her spiritual power to suppress it. With nowhere to go, the 3 mermaids were frightened out of their wits and immediately regretted that they did not seize the opportunity to run away when Gu Shijie was dealing with the bad men. "My lord, what should we do?" "My lord, we do not want to die." "Don't worry, I promise that you will all survive. However, I need you to continue acting in a state of panic." Gu Shijie directed an audio message to the 3 of them. They looked at one another in confusion, but decided to do as told and cried out even louder. As for the dozens of armed men who had just escaped death, they were relieved to be saved and watched Gu Shijie and the mermaids through the surveillance camera. From their point of view, they saw that Gu Shijie tried to tear the net apart forcibly, but ended up being electrified. Then, she sat quietly with her eyes closed. The soldiers were no longer as distressed as before. "Looks like the people's supreme leader is afraid of electricity," one of the men said contemptuously. "Of course. No one can possibly survive the electrical current. Supreme leader? She is nothing but a woman from the future, who has become famous with a little kung fu tricks. If I came any earlier, I would have become their lord. All right, let's get her in. After all, she is our strongest opponent here. If we send her to our leader, it will be yet another achievement." They continued the heated discussion, and came to the same conclusion that she was worth keeping. In order to prevent Gu Shijie from running away, they decided to keep the net on her as they moved her into one of the cabins. One of the men went to the control center and pressed a button. Streaks of light flashed by, displaying the projection of an officer in the middle of a room. His shoulder was full of silver badges indicating his status and level of achievement. Looking tall and strong, his stern appearance made him look like an authoritative figure. "Little bastards, What is the matter? How many mermaids have you got? Report, sir. We have got 3 mermaids and are now on the way to deliver them. This time, we will bring someone else with us. The mermaids call her their lord. Chapter 26:16. A massive tragedy, too. The officer on the receiving end of the news was not entirely convinced. Their lord? Is it the impostor that everyone has been blabbering about? How did you manage to capture her so easily? It is true. That was how the mermaids addressed her. We noticed that she seemed to have mastered some modern aspects of kung fu. She is also good with guns. Rotate the camera toward her. I need to see her through the screen. Yes, sir. Seconds later, the big screen in the cabin displayed the 3 mermaids and Gu Shijio. The officer's eyes lingered a little longer on Gu Zijia's face, as if studying an object. A moment later, an evil grin appeared on his face. I cannot tell how capable she is, but she is stunning. I am aroused. Send her here quickly. I need to take a better look at her. If I am happy with the girl, I will reward all of you. Yes. The soldiers all went back to their respective positions, and the pilots started to maneuver the ship. From the outside, any passerby could easily notice the drastic change in the ship's appearance. In just a few clicks, its entire exterior seemed to have transformed into something completely different than before. Soon, the ship rose into the air and flew swiftly towards the west. As the ship was large and well-balanced, it did not take long for it to travel steadily. Once it did, the injured soldiers finally had the opportunity to treat their wounds. They could not stop cursing at the unpleasant experience. To make matters worse, all of their injuries were caused by their own guns. Out of frustration, one of them lashed out. The woman moves incredibly fast. How did she know how to use our guns so precisely? I have not been hurt in a while, especially from a woman. Yes, if she had not seized our guns, there was no way that she could hurt us. All our uniforms have the ability to shield us against all sorts of spells and magic. It is only the high beam from these guns that can penetrate through our protective clothing. All right. At least we have got her in our hands now. The wounds are part and parcel of the achievement. All of us will be rewarded at the end of the day. Why did you think the officer was asking for her specifically? Is he going to send her away? The woman is the lord that everyone has been talking about. We should actually send her to the admiral. Our officer is always attracted to beautiful ladies. We have been here for around a year, and he has slept with a different girl every night. The girl is too beautiful for him to give away without sleeping with her first. Not everyone gets to sleep with a lord, you know. Ha! Their conversation had taken a sharp, perverted turn. Meanwhile, a gust of wind flurried by the side of one of the soldiers all of a sudden and caught his attention. It was almost as if he could smell the sea. The injured man trembled a little and looked at his fellow comrade aghast. Is this place normally ventilated? That's impossible. The cabin is sealed. There is no room for any wind to enter. I could clearly feel the air flowing by just a second ago. Could there be a ghost in our vessel? A ghost? Nonsense. I am a firm believer in the laws of physics and science. I never take these mythical things into account. It is hard to say. Many strange things exist in this world that is beyond explanation, just like their magic. I can somehow tell that their spells are as powerful as our guns even though they are rather odd. How odd can they be when they are all enslaved? We have thoroughly beaten them. Actually, those that we have encountered thus far are the ones with the weakest spiritual power. You know, their spiritual power is actually categorized into different levels. The highest is level 9, and yet all that we have found are only at level 4. The stronger ones are all gathered at a specific place. The Admiral has been trying to tear the place down, and it seems like the fight will have to take some more time. We have suffered a great loss too. Many lives lost on our part. I really do not know what the Admiral is thinking. The whole war can be ended with an antimatter bomb. All of them will be gone in an instant. Why should we waste our lives and resources in this endless fight? Chapter 26:17. A massive tragedy 3. Hush. Our leader knows what he is doing. We should not comment on such things. He will end our lives if he found out. All right, enough about the Admiral. His decisions are beyond our control. That is right. My only hope is that we can finally settle down here in Starry Crescent Land. I no longer want to wander about with no place to call home. I want some security in my life. Haha. Wang, are you joking? We are pirates of the galaxy. Our lives are supposed to be adventurous and deadly. Are you really longing for security? Damn, all these years have been tough. I cannot help but think about retirement already. In fact, I am starting to miss our own planet. Stop thinking about it. We are all wanted fugitives on our own planet. Going back means death for all of us. Now that we are here on this ship, we should do our best for the Admiral. At least we get to eat well, drink well, and have a decent life. Their conversation carried on until one of them suddenly said, I can somehow feel that someone is watching us. Shocked, the others looked around the place but saw nothing. Huang, you are overthinking. Huang scratched his head in confusion and said nothing more. Quietly, he continued to maneuver the ship. What the men did not see was that Wuxia was actually standing right in front of the control desk. She was observing how Huang controlled the buttons in order to make the ship fly. It was only her soul that was lingering around the place, however. No one could see her without her physical body. She could tell that the ship was still sailing slightly above the water. It was traveling at a really great speed, like a cannonball that was sent across the air. Since no one saw anything suspicious, the others continued to indulge in their conversation. Nonetheless, a moment later, someone suddenly complained, I feel so itchy. It's terribly uncomfortable. Unfortunately, before he could scratch away the uncomfortable sensation, he had to remove his protective clothing. Before anyone knew what had happened, the itch had started to spread across the room. Soon, everyone else in the room started complaining that their skin was itchy and took off their protective clothing as well. Apparently, all of them broke out in a terrible rash. The itching sensation was thoroughly uncomfortable. After scratching themselves for a while, they suspected that they might be having an allergic reaction to something, so they started consuming some anti-allergy medicine. The medicine, however, did not make them feel any better. Out of fear, they started scratching each other's skin just to see if they could recognize the rash. The pilot, Huang, was so uncomfortable that he started scratching his body on the control deck. His eyes were itchy too, so he had to rub his eyes to seek some comfort. When he dropped his hands on the control panel again, he pressed some of the buttons by accident and opened one of the doors. As the door opened, a loud splash could be heard. Huang, you bastard. Which button did you press? You have thrown the net away. Someone exclaimed in anger. Huang immediately looked out the window and saw that their 3 captives had already been freed from the net. The 3 mermaids were already swimming away as fast as they could. They must have felt as though a miracle had happened to them for them to escape death today. Unfortunately, none of them took notice of the unconscious woman, who was still floating on the surface of the water. With a curse, Huang quickly lowered the ship so that he could recapture the woman with the net. Securely, he placed her in a sealed cabin again. Luckily for them, the officer only seemed eager to see the Lord. In fact, they were feeling too uncomfortable to care about the other 3 mermaids that had just escaped. Their first priority was to get this woman back to their commanding officer as quickly as possible. With a victorious smile, Wuxia watched as the mermaids escaped. She did not want them around in her plans anyway. She was the one responsible for the men's suffering. They should not have to pay any price for that. In actuality, she was the one who unlocked the door while Huang was busy rubbing his eyes. Hence, things were going according to her plan. The fact that her soul remained invisible had been a great help to her in retrieving information from the soldiers. At least, she managed to find out who these people really were. She also learned how advanced their weapons had been developed. Chapter 26:18. Revenge. More importantly, she knew how the people of the Starry Crescent Land were holding up in the fight. It seemed like there was still hope since most of the skilled people here had not been annihilated. Mu Feng and his men must have joined forces in the resistance. She needed to find them. She also wanted to find the admiral that these men had spoken about. Playing hostage might be the fastest way for her to do so after all. As soon as the ship took off, it traveled 100 times faster than sound. It was a smooth journey, however, due to the stability of the ship and its advanced technology. About an hour later, a city slowly became visible to them. Gu Shijio squinted her eyes in order to see it clearly. Soon, she recognized that it was Xingyao City, a place where the Feixing Kingdom used to settle its military affairs. Frustrated by what she saw, Gu Shijio clenched her fists tightly. Xingyao City was no longer the bustling place that it used to be. Commoners no longer roamed the streets. Instead, it was filled with arrogant and violent soldiers, each with multiple women in their arms. They walked around harassing people as they pleased, which was a completely revolting sight. One of the women noticeably decided to push one of the arrogant men away, which triggered the heavily bearded man into a fit. He kicked the woman away and did not even wait for her to get back up before stomping his foot on her hand. As expected, the woman screamed in pain. By the streets, some men were working tirelessly in construction. They all looked sallow and emaciated. Most of them were obviously carrying injuries on them, and none of their clothes were clean. Their ankles were chained, thus restricting their movement. Upon seeing the woman being harassed, all of them were very frustrated by the bearded man's aggressive mistreatment. One of them was so angry that he actually launched a strike at the man. What an animal! Let her go! His level 3 spiritual power supported his spell, and a ball of bright light could be seen headed toward the bearded man. Nonetheless, the bearded man tittered at the attempt without any intention to move away. The ball of bright light was extinguished once it made contact with the bearded man's body. He did not even flinch. What a pariah! How dare you attack an officer? One of the guards pressed a button, and it seemed to put the man in agonizing pain as he fell to his knees at first, and then rolled on the ground. His skin started to burn to the point where the small of flesh lingered in the air. The Lord will be back one day. She will get revenge for all of us. In the brief outburst of anger, the man no longer held back his frustration, for he knew he would not live long. All of you are animals. One day you will get a taste of your own medicine. The Lord will not show you any mercy. With tears and blood, he shouted out loud until his voice turned hoarse. Haha, what is a lord? I bet this lady you speak of must be hiding somewhere. If she dares to show up, I will rape her on the spot and make her call me her daddy. The bearded man made an arrogant and shameless remark. While he was still laughing at his own humor, a warplane could be seen falling from the sky and crashing down at a blazing pace. In a matter of seconds, the bearded man and the team members close to him were crushed. Although they were wearing their protective clothing, there was no chance they could survive the impact of a falling craft if they were hit at a direct angle. After the dust settled, the body of the bearded man could be seen hanging at the tip of the warplane without any sign of life. On the other hand, his companions were mostly dead, if not fatally injured. The crash site was instantly filled with mourning and sorrowful sounds. As for the women, they quickly ran away as soon as the soldiers were distracted by the falling warplane. The warplane seemed to be targeted at the soldiers on the street. In fact, none of the women were hurt. They were shocked by the scene and stood in fear. Chapter 26:19, Revenge 2. Huang, are you out of your mind? The soldiers were frustrated with their pilot for crashing the warplane. I did not press anything. It suddenly went out of control. Huang tried to explain himself in a blind panic. Something is wrong. Something is really wrong. The warplane was stationary on the ground as the conversation took place. In a matter of seconds, loud banging noises could be heard on top of the aircraft. It was the sound of frustration coming from the surviving soldiers who were mourning the loss of their dead companions. Huang did not know what to do. If he opened the door, he would surely be killed. The rest of his crew were scared too. After all, they were part of the team. As they were contemplating the consequences of staying put or opening the hatchet, the warplane suddenly rose above the ground and started flying again. Those on the outside of the warplane slipped and fell from the vessel. Meanwhile, those on the inside were not having it any better either. They had lost their balance and rolled round in the cabin like dice. It was only after a period of time that they finally managed to get to their feet. Once they were aware of their surroundings, Huang noticed that the buttons on the control deck were moving automatically. The man was terrified as he could not see anyone there. Yet the buttons seemed to be moving on their own. It's the Lord. She must be messing with our controls. Huang was the first person to realize the problem. Nonsense. Isn't she trapped in the gossamer net? How can she possibly be controlling the vehicle? Turn on the surveillance camera. Now. One of the men then rushed forward to press a button. The screen flickered slightly before displaying the scene in the cabin where Gu Shijie was imprisoned. To their dismay, all they saw was an empty net. The woman was nowhere to be seen. It is her. It is really her. She has gone invisible. Huang and the rest of the men started to panic upon that realization. They quickly retrieved their guns and started frantically shooting at the control deck, since they knew that their weapons would not damage it. If the high-powered laser beam were to hit a person, it would surely burn a hole through their body. Without the specific medicine required to treat the wound, the body would slowly rot, turning the flesh into a pool of pus. The laser beams flashed by densely, covering every area of the control deck. If someone were really there, he or she would be pierced with holes through their body. Seeing that there was obviously no chance for anyone to escape that attack, they finally stopped shooting and looked at one another. The Lord should be dead by now, they thought to themselves. She couldn't escape such a blast. At this moment, the warship was hanging in midair, like a floating machine. They were about to get closer to the control deck and have a look, but a sudden announcement interrupted them. Paging, Warplane 138. Warplane 138. Please respond immediately. A broadcast suddenly came through. The men looked up and were shocked. Dozens of warplanes had surrounded them in a siege. One of the warplanes was unusually huge, almost twice the size of their own craft. Sir. Sir. Huang responded in a trembled voice. Damn, what is going on here? A stern voice could be heard from the broadcast. It was their commanding officer that they were on their way to meet. We had lost control of our plane for a moment, but things are all right now. Lost control? Who was controlling the plane? It was the woman that we captured, the Lord. Bastard. If you had caught her, how did she control the plane? Where is she now? She could be dead. The conversation suddenly went silent for a moment. Bastard. Who asked you to kill her? The officer was obviously infuriated. Where is her body? Chapter 2620, Revenge 3. We have not found the body. We are going to look for it now. Indignant, the commanding officer was angered by the terse answer. What a bunch of idiots. Before Huang could check the area in front of the control deck, the warplane suddenly changed direction again. This time, it was lunging forward at full speed, and was headed directly toward the massive warplane in front of them. Ah, no. The injured men in the warplane exclaimed as they were, once again, on the ground due to the intense and sudden movement of the vessel. Bastards! What are you doing? Stop it! Stop it now! If you don't, I will shoot you down. A series of verbal abuse came through the broadcast. Huang pulled himself together and went straight to the control deck, but was immediately repelled by an invisible wizardry barrier. He was sent across the air and crashed straight into a wall. The impact almost killed him. The rest noticed how severe the situation was, so they all made their way forward and tried to take back control of the warplane. They needed to make it stop, or that would spell the end of their lives anyway. Charging forward at full speed, all of them experienced the same fate as Huang, and were repelled across the cabin. I will shoot now. Damn it. I will shoot you if you don't stop the plane at once. The commanding officer had run out of patience, and finally, he authorized the shooting. The men in the cabin struggled to their feet, only to see a giant missile headed toward them. It was at that time that Gu Shijie finally revealed herself. There she stood, in a dreamy white dress right next to the control deck. Gracefully, she turned around and bid these men farewell. Bye. This was the last word they heard. and she was also the last person they saw before a blinding circle of light engulfed the warplane. The commanding officer watched as the warplane was shattered into pieces and fell from the sky. His face sank in utter disappointment. He knew the power of the weapons he possessed. The plane, as well as every person on board, would surely perish. What a waste, he sighed. He had yet to meet the beautiful lord. His warplane was currently hundreds of kilometers away from Xingyao City, but he insisted on returning. Get us back to the city, he swiftly commanded his crew. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 20 other warplanes responded in unison as soon as they received his command, and all of them turned their planes around and were ready to fly back to the city. Sir, aren't you going to look for the body of the lord? What for? She is surely a pile of ash by now. The commanding officer was not very pleased by the stupid suggestion. His second officer dared not speak another word, and simply turned his attention back to the control deck instead. Damn, those idiots could not even secure a woman. What a great loss. The commanding officer was still frustrated by his unfulfilled ambition to meet the lady. How great is the loss? A woman could be heard whispering in his ear. Her voice was as eerie to him. Panicked, the commanding officer turned around and saw a woman in white standing behind him. Her pitch-black hair was secured in place by an elegant jade hairpin, and her watery eyes glistened in the light like a myriad of stars shining in the darkest night. Her features, with her unprecedented aura and grace, would leave a profound impact on anyone. The lady he longed for was simply standing elegantly in the corner of his ship. Yet the officer had no words for her, as he was stunned by her beauty and could only stare at her in awe. The Lord. Chapter 26-21, Revenge 4. Although the commanding officer had a chance to see Gu Zijia's face earlier through one of his screens, she had her eyes closed and half of her face hidden, so he could not see it very clearly. However, it was certainly enough for him to tell that she was a beautiful woman. Nevertheless, it was beyond his expectation that she would look 100 times more captivating in real life than through the screen. As soon as their eyes met, his heart thumped with excitement. He did not know what to say and could only look at her in admiration. Gu Shijio gave him a faint smile to toil with him. As expected, the man was absolutely captivated by her smile, but what came next was of a completely different tone. How dare you harm my people? I will kill you all for what you have done. As soon as she was done speaking, she used her teleportation skill and found herself in front of the control deck of the commanding officer's aircraft. Swiftly, her fingers pressed a series of buttons in a familiar sequence, and she took control of the warplane. The next thing that happened would surely drive the officer crazy. All the missiles available on the warplane were activated and targeted at different directions. He knew that she was going to blow up the neighboring aircrafts around his ship. Before he had any time to respond, the shooting began. Bam, bam, bam. The destruction continued, with every consecutive detonation beaming with the sound of death. White lights were flashing in the distance as all the warplanes were hit and destroyed right in the air. Officer, what is going on? Officer, please come in. Officer, what happened? Officer. His men from the smaller warplanes all started panicking. They needed an answer from their commanding officer, but nothing was heard besides the sound of their vehicles blowing up. Stop it. Stop. Damn it, stop everything that you are doing. The commanding officer was desperate. He could not care less about how she escaped from the smaller warplane from before. All he cared about was to get back control of his warship. He flipped his hand and turned the watch on his wrist into a silver, white gun. He pointed the gun at Gu Shijio and warned, I will kill you if you don't stop. His second officer was charging toward Gu Shijio in an attempt to push her away from the controls. Gu Shijio laughed at them sarcastically before putting herself in a bubble of light, which soon turned into an invisible wizardry barrier. The second officer was not aware of the barrier and hurt himself right in the head. Gu Shijio took her new freedom to control the shooting again. Yet another warplane was shattered into ashes. She then scornfully teased the commanding officer. The bomb is great. One detonation is enough to shatter an entire plane. Try to guess which one I am going to destroy next. The commanding officer was going crazy. All these troops were some of the best men he had ever trained. And yet he had to watch as this woman put an end to their lives. What was even more frustrating was that his warplane was the one that was the culprit. He had always been very proud of the performance of his warplane, but not right now. He only wished that he had never installed any weapons on it in the first place. That was the last straw for the commanding officer. He could no longer show any mercy to the woman, despite her unorthodox beauty. Frantically, he started shooting at her. However, the laser beam could not penetrate through the wizardry barrier she had in place. The commanding officer finally realized that the level of the Lord was vastly different from the rest of the people he had encountered. She was a deity, and her level of spiritual power was unfathomable. Driven by despair, he tried his best to aim all his weapons at the barrier to try to get revenge. He tried everything that he could, but it was completely useless. Helplessly, he watched as the woman continued to destroy the remaining warplanes he had in the sky. You're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.